All right, so thanks everyone who stayed around last night for a bit of report writing. It was a very successful session and we didn't go too late, which was great. I think the MSAB has put down some good paragraphs, quite a few requests, which is great. This is the time to do that. I'm really happy about the report and how this meeting has been going. I wanted to start. We left the report. We thought, okay, there's a couple of paragraphs. Actually, there's probably a few paragraphs, more than a few, that people wanted to think about and come back. So I cleaned up the report last night, emailed it out. If you did not get that, just let me know and I'll make sure I am emailing it to the right email address. But I wanted to start with paragraph 28. Everything before then we have reviewed, but we'll review again today at some point. But 28 is one that we thought we would come back and have a look at. And actually last night I made a little bit of a modification to try to clear up this paragraph. So I just wanted to review it this morning and make sure that everybody's okay with it. And I think we have enough time to go through some specifics on the paragraphs here, and then we'll have time again after the agenda item 5. So this one's about the HSP tables, and the MSAB's requesting 2 are created. One is succinct for presentation. The other for distribution, possibly via MSE Explorer, is larger. And includes the additional sort of factors and items that the MSAB was interested in reporting in that table.
Chris, I saw your hand was up. Did you have something that you wanted to?
Yeah, Dr. Hicks kind of got to it there. I was looking for just a little more information as to what we're exactly talking about here in that, but he's answered that. I just got to wrap my brain around it.
Yeah, and this is how I see it. So if the MSAB has a different opinion, please let me know. But we wanted to keep it succinct and small to where it currently is, so that we can present that in a presentation. But in the document that's provided, and then on MSE Explorer, think about some of these additional elements that would be important. That the MSAB is interested in including. During the meeting, we talked about a block that is, using a fixed productivity regime, more like the current regime, and maybe we should put that. Did we have that somewhere in one of these paragraphs? I thought we talked about.
Yes, I think you have recent productivity or something, short-term productivity projections using fixed productivity.
Oh yeah, it's right here. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so it's there. And then, people were interested in the actual median relative spawning biomass and then the actual median of the absolute spawning biomass to have some more context there.
Alan, you mentioned while you were speaking that it would be in the report, but in the paragraph, it only says MSE Explorer. I think it's very useful to have it for accessibility purposes, to have it printed in the report as an appendix or just in the body of the report as a whole.
So, yeah, the larger table will be in the annual meeting document.
Great.
And possibly via MSE Explorer.
I'm trying to remember exactly what table we're talking about that we see at the annual meeting now. Could you just refresh my memory? I'm blanking out here.
Yeah, no problem. And you might have been absent the first day that I presented it. It's the Harvest Strategy Policy table, and it's the table that has the same columns as the decision table. But then the rows, there's a long-term section and a short-term section. And then the performance metrics associated with the priority objectives, the 4 objectives, or the 3 objectives, but 4 performance metrics. And then one additional performance metric is the probability that the spawning biomass is less than the spawning biomass in 2023. And so it's basically fixing the SPR from what's in the decision table, but then projecting using the MSE projections as an indication of if you were to manage this way in the next 10 to 70 years, these are the expectations you would have.
So it's not in the presentations for this meeting.
It was in 06, I believe.
It was in 06.
Presentation for 06 and
06. Okay. You know what slide I got? 06 in front
Slide
of
25.
slide
Oh,
25. There you go.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and this is something new that we've done for the last 2 annual meetings. And so this is the slide 25 is what we would present in the presentation to the commission in the document on MSE Explorer. There'd probably be another block with a short-term current productivity or something like that and these same metrics. And then potentially we'll figure out where to put in some additional metrics like the relative spawning biomass and absolute spawning biomass.
Sorry, Alan. I'll just jump in here.
Yeah.
So for this table, I like the idea of this table. We've talked about it in the past. Just so we're not making decisions, we understand the long-term implications of decisions. Did you say, like, is this right now would be showing the integrated productivity? Would there be a low productivity version of this as well?
And so that's what's requested.
Okay, that's what
in here, but it wouldn't be necessarily a low productivity. It would be a fixed productivity based on what the perceived. Sorry, it's all the way out to here. What the recent perceived productivity is. So for annual meeting 103, that would be a low productivity using current weighted age. But 10 years in the future, hopefully we're projecting at more of a medium productivity or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
It just gives, I think there's a lot of interest in, okay, we know we're having this low productivity. I just want to see what if we stayed in this current state. And so I think it would be useful.
I agree.
And, I was thinking, I just don't want to have a lot of table to present to the commission, but, make them aware it's available in the document. And then the participants can see those numbers as well and present them as they find the time to do that. Yeah, and thanks, Chris, for asking the questions. I realize you weren't there on day one when we talked about this, so it's good to review it and make sure that you understand, and anyone that wasn't there for this to understand as well.
Okay, my only question would be is where we see this second table appearing. I guess my point is I think the second table, I think both tables could be very valuable. I think the second table, giving it's the recent perceived productivity, could be very, very enlightening. I just want to make sure it doesn't get buried somewhere where no one's going to find it. Like, if no one's going to look on MSE Explorer, like, can we put it in an appendix of a paper somewhere, just so it's selfishly, it's easy for me to find so I can point it out to people. Thanks.
Yep, and that's why I've added here in the annual meeting MSE document. So basically the larger table would be the table you're seeing on slide 25, and then additional rows added to it for these additional elements. And that larger table would appear in the MSE document. And then for presentation, but I mean, we can have the conversation. I just don't want to overwhelm the presentation with a lot of numbers. I want to focus people in on the actual MSE results during the presentation, but I'm open to suggestions from the MSAB if they would prefer to just have this larger table available. And then with the elements here in the latter section, and then we could change this request to the MSAB request expanding the HSP table to include this and that. And then there is just one table, and I would present that whole table, which would make it a lot smaller in the presentation. I mean, the decision table has a lot of rows in it, so it would be possible. So any opinions from the MSAB on if they would rather just have one single HSP table with these elements in it?
Dr. Allen, it's Christopher.
Yep.
And so I apologize to everybody. I wasn't here for this part of the meeting. I might be going over ground that was already covered, so my apologies.
No problem.
For this table, is the table, whether it's the short table or the long table, is it going to use the recent perceived productivity? Or is that only in one table?
That's only in the larger table as this request is currently worded. But we can, if we want to reword it, just remove the two and just say expand the HSP tables to a larger table that includes, or expand the HSP tables. I could delete all of this. And then this. That the HSP table. And I mean, honestly, this would probably be the better way so that people aren't confused and what the table is and what it does and doesn't include.
So the table we'll use for the short-term metrics, looking at slide 25.
Yep.
That short-term metrics point would be using the recent perceived productivity, where the long-term would be using the integrated product, the long-term productivity, integrated productivity.
No, I would prefer to have the long-term and the short-term as they are in this table, add a new block below that says short-term metrics with current perceived productivity, and then a whole nother block with different. So you can compare the integrated to the to say a low productivity scenario or fixed productivity scenario. And so you would see, okay, how is, if we were to stay where we currently are, how is that different than if we were to potentially jump out of this productivity regime? And so, yeah, I think I've always tried to present the MSc results as integrated over productivity because we really don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. And then having a specific productivity presented alongside that. So it'd be a third block below this, and then a couple more rows for the relative spawning biomass and absolute spawning biomass.
So it would basically show slide 25, first block long-term metrics, second block short-term metrics, and then third block short-term metrics with the perceived recent productivity with a couple other things below it.
Yeah, that's correct. According to how we've remodified this request, or that would just be the larger table.
Okay, I mean, and again, I wasn't part of the discussion. I think I could probably live with what you're proposing there, but I'm wondering, could you do it long-term metrics, short-term metrics, and then do long-term metrics, perceived productivity, short-term metrics, perceived productivity, and the other characteristics, the other thing, reporting metrics such as median RSP below that? I know that maybe makes it longer. I just think that the question, to be frank, what I'm struggling with is this the normal? Are we in normal right now? And in fact, what we saw with the big recruitment and all that stuff, was that something like an event?
Right.
So I'd like to see what it means over the long term too. But like I said, I wasn't part of the discussion, and I apologize for bringing it up.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I mean, I can make this table as big as we want, and then figure out a way to present it. I'll probably have to break it between two slides or something like that. So it's totally fine. But I think that makes sense to present long and short under the fixed productivity. And that, as I mentioned yesterday, that's that is done in some other fishery arenas, fisheries management arenas, such as ICES. They take their perceived productivity and then project forward with that to calculate even reference points. From other MSAB members, are we good with the modification here? And the modification is to just have one single harvest strategy policy table that is expanded to include the things that we talked about during this meeting. Have some think about it. We'll have another chance when we adopt the report to really review this paragraph again.
We have a hand up from Courtney.
Okay.
Hello. I just noticed a bit of terminology change. I guess today we were talking about current perceived productivity, and yes, I think the report still says recent. Do we have a preference for one or the other? I think we're talking about the same concept here, but maybe we want to make a conscious choice on one of those terms or the other.
Yeah, that would be more consistent. I have been labeling the weighted age as current as the last 5 years. So maybe we'll just change it to that. If you're okay with that, Courtney, that'll be consistent with the language I have been using.
Just to avoid anybody wondering if they're
Yeah.
if they do in fact differ.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Any other comments on paragraph 28? Well, let's move on for now, and then we'll have an opportunity to come back to this. We also talked a bit about how movement is parameterized in the OM, and that it varies with the PDO regime, and that there may be other factors affecting variability in movement, such as the size of the year class. So we're only allowing movement to change with PDO regime, and I think the MSAB made a good comment that it might have other factors. Density dependence might be one too that we've been interested in examining. The individual models, we're just noting that it predicted the higher biomass in region 3, and this may be due to different Pacific halibut behaviors in recent years, such as those related to movement rates or recruitment distribution. The MSE simulations with the OM use performance metrics to identify how the MP performs over medium and long term, while the ensemble stock assessment is used for immediate term tactical decision making and current status determination. And then a request to have a presentation at the next MSAB meeting on how an ensemble of models is integrated into a single set of results. I modified this paragraph a little bit. I clarified it slightly, and then from our draft last night, and then the uses of the ensemble stock assessment and OM and the connections between the two. That'll be fun. Ian and I have been talking about that for years, and actually we've been wanting to sort of write a paper on the continuum between these models, going from tactical to strategic decision making. So that was the end of 4.1, sort of a look at the work that has been done, and then we got.
Sorry, Alan.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, just jump in. I can't see if any hands.
Okay. Just on paragraph 31, maybe splitting a really fine hair here. We talk about the immediate term, we talk about the medium term, long term. We don't really talk about the short term.
Yeah.
Would it be worthwhile to say, because the operating model can do short term, medium, and long term? I mean,
yeah, when I wrote it, I thought about that. And my concern, the reason I didn't put in short is I think a lot of people are still confused. I don't think a lot of people have our definition of immediate in their mind yet. And a lot of people think of the stock assessment as being short term.
Okay.
So maybe I can clarify.
No, if that's your rationale, it makes sense to me. I really like the distinction you've come up with about immediate term, short term, medium term, long term.
Then maybe it's worthwhile to start getting people used to that, and just put in something like that. And so that it's really clear. And I'll actually just put in the term, short term, medium term. And then I'll put in 1 to 3 years here. I do like that, Chris. It makes it really clear.
And then for long term, are you just going to define that as more than?
It's usually equilibrium,
Oh, okay.
but it's limited by how much time I have to do the simulations. Yeah, that's good. And then we start, really making it clear the language that we're using, and we can bring in the immediate term and really have that, I guess, make people more used to it over the, the next while. Great. Okay. And as I said, I can't see hands, so just jump in. And so then we got into the development of the program of work, which included a number of tasks. The MSAB noted the high priority and low priority topics that were in the report of the 102nd session of the IPHC annual meeting, and I put in the link there. And then the MSAB recalled these 2 paragraphs from the commission noting should not include topics related to distribution of the TCY, and that the harvest strategy policy may be updated in the future. Here's a request. The MSAB requested further evaluations of the following MP elements, SPRs, which we put a number, we added a bit from the MSAB021 recommendation or request. And then a triennial assessment frequency with various empirical rules. That's good.
Just on the SPRs, Alan,
Yeah.
do you have time to actually do that many SPRs? Like, do we have to prioritize those, or that's fine? Okay, good.
No, I do a lot. I do more than that. And so I think this is good for a request, and I will do more, especially if I do the reference points analysis. I'll have to go down into the 30s on the SPRs and possibly even to the 20s to make sure I'm getting to MSY. But I do like to fill in between these numbers as well, make things smooth. But I like this because this is the core set that I make sure I have this set run, for a low productivity regime and things like that. When I do other than the fully integrated, I'll make sure I have this core set simulated, and so we can see how it looks. But if there is, a specific SPR that you do want as part of the core, let me know. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that is when you start expanding out to triennial assessment frequency, different constraints, that just multiplies 8 times 2 times 3 times 4, whatever. So I think it's a good number to start with. And I don't think the MSAB's interested in going any lower or higher fishing intensity than 40%. We're not interested in like a 38 or 35 is our current MSY fishing intensity proxy. So then moving on, the MSAB requested evaluating constraints. There's some specifics here, but I think this does give a little bit of opportunity for the Secretariat to come up with some ideas, and then noting that we'll have another MSAB meeting where we'll have a chance to then get into some more specifics. But I think this is a good set of constraints that we can begin to understand how they work and then go into some real specifics on that. MSAB requested some specific productivity regimes. And what I might do, this might help. Is that helpful so that we are aware, like now that we're going to do some with the harvest strategy policy table and we mentioned current perceived productivity regime, that we've actually defined it in this report?
Yes.
Great. And so that way it's clear that unless something drastic changes next year, that we'll use this as the current perceived. Okay, so then we got, so this is elements of management procedures. Now we're getting into the analysis to determine, to inform a depleted limit reference point, and that those simulations include some sensitivities to different productivities, different levels of depensation, which is that relationship between low spawning size and recruitment, and also fecundity of size assumptions. So I thought that was, go ahead.
Yeah, I see Forrest has his hands up. Sorry, guys, I'm kind of back and forth. I'm trying to keep track of hands.
No problem. Just jump in right now. I'm sharing the screen, so I can't see everything.
Am I live? I'm working off my phone today.
Yeah.
You talked about constraints, and I might have missed it, but are you also going to look at smoothers? Because we did talk about that, and like a smoother on the FIS. If we go to empirical, that's sufficient? Just okay. I might have.
Is that sufficient for you in terms of smoothers?
I'm on my phone and I can't even read what you're writing or like go through the report here. I'm in a different position today. I'm not at home. I'm outside, so I apologize for that.
No problem. It says for a 3-year rolling average on the FIS 032W PUE used in the empirical rule in a triennial stock assessment frequency.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And so all of these constraints in paragraph 37 are somewhat related to the triennial assessment frequency. So there's no constraint listed for if you're doing an annual stock assessment. And so we've had thoughts about slow up, fast down in the past. We've done a specific percentage, 15%. So have a think about that, and then maybe after we finish agenda item 5, we can come back and talk about if the MSAB wants to add anything specific to annual assessments.
Tom has his hand up.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot last night, and it seems like we're really getting wrapped around the axle about this whole thing about depletion. And I guess I don't even know why we need the term depletion. It's like we don't know from a biologic biomass amount what our overfish limit is. We have percentages, but percentages of what? For 15 years now, we keep asking, what is the biomass of a healthy population? What is the biomass of an overfish population? And the answer is, well, we're working on it. But that answer has gone on for 15 years. And how are we going to possibly get an actual number for depleted when we don't even have an actual number for biomass overfish? It just seems like we're adding a term that's going to add more confusion. I almost see it as a diversion or distraction from trying to get a hard number for what we want our spawning biomass to not go below 20%. I mean, 20% of 10 is 2, 20% of 1,000 is 200. So percentages don't mean much unless you tie it to a fixed number. And it's like, when are we going to get a fixed number instead of all just constantly talking about percentages?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And I think that is what people have been asking for a long time, 15 years, however long it's been. People have been answering that or asking that exact question. And so working with the SRB in the last couple of years, we've identified, okay, we can have this overfished concept as a percentage of unfished spawning biomass. That's useful because it tells us the effect of fishing. But we need to bring in what you're saying is, what is the size of a healthy population? How many spawners or what weight of spawners, how much reproductive capability do we need to have in the water? And that's where we're bringing in the depleted concept. So we actually want to have these two concepts, one to really assess our effective fishing, and the other to determine if the stock is at a level that's of serious concern, and that's the depleted. And so we haven't done any work to determine a depleted limit reference point, but we now have a proposal to do that work and do that analysis and come up with a scientifically valid biomass that we really want to stay above. So that is really what we're hoping to do. And I realize, I can see your frustration for sure. It's like we have this percentage, and that's been a concern of mine. It's like a percentage of what? The denominator in that percentage is changing every year. And so is it really allowing us to stay above a spawning biomass that would be of concern? And we could get to those low levels based on productivity. So we're hoping to do that work and really clearly define these two concepts. And so hopefully I'm working on the presentation of that, and Ian and I have been really talking about that a lot, and we're open to feedback. If anybody wants to help us with that, we're always open to feedback, because we really want to make sure these two concepts are clear and understandable to everybody, why we're pursuing this. But hopefully now we're actually going to do the analysis to answer that question you asked. It's like, when are we going to get a number of biomass? And hopefully in the next year we'll have that. And that's exactly what these simulations are, to help us determine that biomass. And so, as with most analyses, you want to do sensitivities, and that's what 39 is. And then with 40, we want to use those simulations, since we're doing them, to actually maybe help understand and reduce the confusion and the frustration of what overfished means and what depleted means. And so we really want to make sure that we understand these two concepts and the interactions between the two. And what I just realized, and I do this too, I actually written depletion in here. And depletion is a word commonly that has been used in the Pacific Council and other councils to measure, how much the stock has been reduced. And usually that is a percentage. And so I think some confusion might be, and I think this is good that I'm finally realizing this. Some of that confusion may be because we're using the term depleted to reference an absolute spawning biomass. So I'll try to really make that clear in the future, that depleted is different than depletion. Sort of like overfished and overfishing. I often confuse those two as well.
Alan,
Yeah.
on number 40, and I'm thinking back to the conversation that we had at the end of day 1 with Jim, and about the recovered and rebuilt, and thinking that it might be useful that whenever we start talking about depleted and overfished, that we also talk about rebuilt and recovered and do the work at the same time, so that we don't find ourselves in a place where we have defined what depleted is, but we haven't defined how. Yeah, so because as people were mentioning yesterday, like once the blob is gone, Pacific cod starts recovering again or increasing again, and then it's like, oh, this could actually happen a lot faster than we thought. Fingers crossed.
So let's go back up here. We had something about that. We put in the word recovered. I can't
So
remember
I think
where that.
22 is where we started doing recovered.
Yep.
Also wondering whether this is the first time that we actually start using that term in this way. And I'm wondering whether it would be useful to take it outside of the report somewhere. I don't know where it might live.
Well, so first of all, is this paragraph 22 getting at that conversation on the first day, where we're interested in not only declaring overfished or depleted, but also what it means to be rebuilt or recovered? And let's see, Oh, yeah. And so what we go on is the MSAB requests some simulation testing to determine rebuilt, but it's not requesting simulation testing for recovered. And maybe that should come down below, because we really need to determine the limit reference point to then determine how best to define recovered. So, and then getting at your second point, Anne Marie, you know, this is the first time we've used recovered. Maybe it'd be useful to have a note in here what recovered actually means. The MSAB noted, you know, that work is being done to, so yeah. Why don't we work? I'm going to put a little placeholder here, and then during the drafting session, we can work on a paragraph about what depleted is, and then that the term recovered can be used instead of rebuilt. So let's think about that, and then during the drafting session, we can draft a paragraph on that. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
And then, so getting at your other point down here, I'm wondering if in what is now 41, that we can also, or maybe we have a new request, and we can work on this during drafting as well. I'm really off the cuff right now, so we can work on this during drafting, but just as a reminder to us.
Yeah, I think it's also determination, but also the interaction. Similar to what you mentioned above in terms of the interaction between overfished and depleted, that there's probably there's probably an interaction between rebuilt and recovered as well.
So I think to do that as well, we should have this paragraph maybe before
I think so, yeah.
that says, first we need to determine if recovered, is that 70% probability, or is it being double the depleted value? What does recovered mean?
Yeah.
And then and then we have, okay, now we need to really understand the interactions between overfished, depleted, rebuilt, and recovered.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I think that's good. Okay, well, we'll work on that during drafting, but I think we have the indication here that that's something to work on. And so let's see, the MSAB, and then the MSAB noted that a depleted limit reference point may inform the development of objectives and or management procedures to avoid a depleted stock. I like that note. The MSAB agreed that analyses should be performed to update reference points, example MSY and MEY, using the updated OM and stock assessment models, and that these analyses should occur at a regular interval. And the MSAB agreed that guidance documents to support the HSP be developed and may include details on a rebuilding plan, exceptional circumstances, and any other topics the Commission would find useful. Okay, and then 46 is something we left to have a little discussion about this morning. And I think we're in full session now, so we can have this discussion. And this is really about what should we be talking about in terms of objectives and performance metrics. So I think it's good. I personally think it's useful to have a discussion about objectives and performance metrics, especially with the development of a depleted limit reference point, if determined. And so this paragraph says, well, the concept here was to really just focus the discussion, have this request to discuss objectives, but not just be open-ended, to have it focused in on something. And so we have here focused on depleted limit reference point, absolute spawning biomass to be at or above, and if coast-wide fishery objectives for each sector are useful, and specifics to the measurable objective to conserve spawning biomass across biological regions. That's the numbers that were presented in the table. I think some of the hang-ups here were the coast-wide fishery objectives.
Yeah, Alan, it's Jim. I don't really understand the fishery objective for each sector. What do you mean by that?
In the past, we have talked about, can we develop some performance metrics that are useful for the recreational sector, and develop some performance metrics that are useful for the commercial sector. So, for example, developing a performance metric for CPUE or something, WPUE in the commercial fishery might be useful. And that's what the SRB actually made a recommendation of, is develop more fishery indicators. And so, but is commercial CPUE informative for the recreational fishery? I don't think it would be. It could be, but maybe there's a specific metrics like, the number of fish in this age class or something. I don't know. I'm thinking off the cuff here. But as I was speaking, I wonder if maybe we can have this request be to focus on some objectives, and then related to what the SRB said, maybe the MSAB can request it developing fishery indicators, fishery performance metrics that, or sector specific fishery performance metrics. What I'm going to do is I'll just read the SRB request again. If I can find it really quick. It's in presentation 07. Thought it was. Yeah, so at SRB 27, paragraph 22, the SRB recommended considering some fishery performance indicators that represent metrics directly observable by stakeholders. Example, fishery CPUE. So I think it would be useful for the MSAB to sort of echo that if they're interested. And maybe we could take it out of the objectives part and just put it into, fishery metrics or fishery indicators.
So this is Jim. I'd rather they be indicators as opposed to more objectives.
Yeah. What if we recalled the okay, I'm thinking off the cuff here again. So I'm just going to paste this in. So the MSAB can recall this recommendation and request developing fishery performance indicators that are informative for various sectors.
Alan,
Yep.
in terms of the context of the SRB recommendation, my vague memory is that it was because it was in the context of talking about why the commissioners were deviating from the harvest control rule recommendation. And so there were, and so some of the discussion at annual meetings were relayed to them in terms of fishing is scratchy, and the distribution is different and all of the various things. And so I think this is the this recommendation came from the SRB as a way to try to incorporate and try to quantify some of those additional measures in terms that came into consideration by the commissioners. And so I guess that might be one, I'm hoping that that's helpful for the MSAB to know where this recommendation came from, or where I have a vague memory of where this came from. And then two, it might be worth discussing, like, is this realistic in terms of trying to capture all of the things that that go into essentially reproducing the commissioner decisions, because it can get super messy and you get new commissioners and all of a sudden something else happens. And so I just wanted to pop that out in terms of a context that this might be going down a rabbit hole that doesn't get us to where I think the original intent came from.
Yeah, it's interesting because this recommendation occurred in the management strategy evaluation section of the SRB report. So yeah, and I do have a vague recollection of that as well. But I think they also, I think it was discussed about, how is this relevant to the decision-making process? But I also thought that it was relevant to, what a determination of the management procedure, where the SRB was talking about, you have maximizing catch, but we don't have any indicators showing how the CPUE changes when you try to maximize the catch, or, the variability. And so I think it was coming from a lot of different places. We can delete the recalling the SRB recommendation here, because I was thinking that this request from the MSAB was coming from more of a management procedure development or management procedure determination point of view, and saying, discussing that the recreational fisheries and the commercial fisheries do have different objectives. And I mean, we've seen that for the last few years at least. And that maybe there are some performance metrics out there that would help us understand why we have those differences between the recreational and the commercial fisheries. So maybe because it's unclear where the SRB was coming from, we just omit that.
Alan, this is first.
Yeah.
And I'm in a public space, and if I've got music piping in, I'll just have to be quiet. Can you guys hear me without too much
we can hear you.
distraction?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So I think this is important. I still haven't wrapped my head around how much it can matter in management procedures and stuff like that. But I'll give an example. Like on the quota side of things, my business, if the coastwide TCY went back to 60 or 70 million pounds, that would be like fantastic. I think the price would drop because we're putting more fish on the market, but I'd be making up for it in volume. And on the low end, I may be willing to take a 5 or 10% cut, because I might make up for it if the price of halibut dock price goes from 750 to 850 a pound or 9, which we've seen in the last couple of years, which could be an anomaly. But on the recreational side of things, I don't need 50 or 60 or 70 million pounds necessarily, depending on the domestic policies, to run a solid business model. But I do suffer really hard at low abundance levels, and I think we've seen that there's been sort of a opposition in the possibly in the needs of the different fisheries. So there is a difference. So if what we're talking about means tracking like the needs of different sectors and having that come to light in consideration for the commissioners, I think it is important to focus on it. So I was just trying to give like a real life example. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Forrest. I think it's the direction of the MSAB. This is sort of a bit of a new concept. We have different representation on the MSAB by sectors or different categories. But we haven't really developed fishery performance indicators that are specific to those categories on the MSAB. And so I think this is a new direction, a very interesting direction. I've heard some talk of it in the past, and we provide a lot of performance metrics. And I think a lot of different people have gravitated to performance metrics that they're interested in, but we haven't formally identified performance metrics that might be informative for these different categories. I think there's been enough talk to develop fishery
Oh,
performance.
hang on, sorry, I have my hand up there.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, I just think that I just remember when we first started this MSE process back many years ago, Dr. Cox and Dr. Crawlin telling us to keep things simple. And I think that trying to look at things like CPUE, I think, given Forrest's comments and others, if we're looking at something to try to meet something said by the SRB, trying to interpret what they think we want, then I think if we're going to look at like something like that, then let's look at, okay, instead of just reporting on a TCY, then saying, okay, coastwide, we want a minimum TCY of this, or we want the TCY of that. That might be a more useful discussion, because that would then, we don't want the TCY to drop below this level. But I think getting into things like CPUE, CPUE can be meaningless for a lot of reasons, because it's going to be affected by the fact that fishermen move to where the fish are. And I don't know, given we have a survey, I think the surveys, I put more trust in that than CPUE. And second of all, just the way fisheries are managed in BC, the halibut fishery is not about catching halibut. It's about not catching yellow eye rockfish.
Yeah. And
it's soon to be about not catching dogfish.
Yeah.
So, all those things affect the CPUE and make a big difference. So I'm not very supportive of a CPUE, but I think if we really wanted to go down this road and talk about performance indicators for stakeholders, then I think it's more along the lines of something like a TCY. But I also think that we shouldn't be adding to our objectives or indicators. I think we should be looking at, okay, if we want to add something like that, what are we going to take off the table? Like, let's keep it simple, because the problem is, the more, as we learned early in the process, the more objectives you put on and the more with their thresholds and things to be met, you can end up with basically having no management procedures that meet your objectives or the thresholds, simply because it becomes too constraining. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to be a little careful about that. So that's my thoughts on this one. I think it warrants more discussion, but I'm not sure that we've determined what those indicators could be.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Chris, because the SRB a recommendation, it says considering some fishery performance indicators that represent metrics observable by stakeholders, example, fishery CPUE. And while you were talking, I was thinking, well, I'll probably come back to the SRB telling them that fishery CPUE is not really a useful metric, because it's not really representing the halibut population, but everything else. And so I guess I'm wondering where the MSAB is on this, and potentially another paragraph is something, along the lines that developing fishery performance indicators at the coastwide level may include, simple metrics such as a minimum TCY or something like that. Or yeah, I'm just trying to think where this conversation is going. So a couple of options here. One, I think, and anybody speak up. I think we've removed this statement from the objectives, and then we're trying determine. We've had some discussion about, you know, the fishery performance indicators, and that's come up with the SRB, but we've also had some discussion about sector specific concepts. And I'm just wondering how we bring that into the report.
Well, I like the way you're going here with this, Alan, and I agree with you. This should not be an objective, and I also really agree with Chris's memory of keeping it simple from both of those guys. I remember that too, but that was a while ago, and that was before, you know, ecosystem management was a big deal, before huge indicators of ocean warming is a bigger deal now than it was then. So I hope this isn't a wrench I'm tossing into this conversation, but it feels like looking at the depleted is really happening because there are things outside of the commercial take impacting the population, the directed fishery take. And if we do go there, then I don't know how much the IPHC is doing, but I'm surprised every time we have a meeting like this of the research that the commission is doing that just is, you know, learning more about the fish, learning more about migration and stuff. I just pay as much attention as.
Did we lose her? Peggy? I can't hear her anymore. Can you guys?
Yeah, I can't hear her either. You might have got cut off at the end there, Peggy.
So this is Jim.
Yeah.
So picking up Peggy's spanner.
Can you hear me now?
You can hear you now. Yeah.
Go for it, Jim.
Yeah, I think there are two different things there, but so both Chris and Peggy, and I think, well, we talked about these, what is important to each sector, like we talked about, you know, minimum TCY, and I think, you know, they may be different for each sector, but it's okay. So if, say, like as Forrest said, like he doesn't need whatever, you know, X million pounds to make his recreational sector business model work. But the overall coastwide, the commercial sector kind of needs, you know, life is easier at 40 million pounds. So maybe that's as simple as maybe that's as complex as we got to get it. It encompasses the different sectors because the rec fits inside the, I don't know if it can, but rec fits inside the commercial one. And so maybe that's the way to look at this. And like we started talking about a few years ago, this, and we never could agree on what that minimum TCY is, but I think we can agree what we don't want it to be, and then work from there. If that makes any sense. Maybe it doesn't.
No, it does make sense. I think you're sort of flipping the view here into, okay, let's not try to define what we do want, but let's try to define what we don't want. And can everybody agree that we don't want this? You know, and that's often a great place to start. But that is really getting into objectives. And I'm wondering if there is, you know, if we want to work on developing a fishery performance indicator that would sort of represent all sectors, if that's even possible.
Well, I mean, we've sort of, like I say, we've got objectives related that report TCY now under each management procedure, what those would be, what the coastwide TCY would be. I mean, like I say, if we wanted to try to swap that one for something like we just talked about, but again, I think we need to make sure we keep it simple and we don't just add more and more objectives on. For example, looking at the paragraph above, paragraph 46, it's talking about an absolute spawning biomass to be at or above. I'd say that is related to a minimum TCY we want to be at or above. You know what I mean? I think we're talking about the same thing there. And the thing that worries me about saying we want an absolute spawning biomass to be at or above, that's the target. Now we have a competing target. That target and the SB36 or SB36 target. And I'm wondering if we are going to go down this road and talk about, and probably we need to have more discussion on it, looking at a minimum TCY, I think that gets us, I think we don't have to have that absolute spawning biomass to be at or above. We have we're talking about a depletion, a limit reference point in terms of absolute spawning biomass. So I think there's a whole discussion here that needs to be further thought out and talked about. But I just think we have to be careful. We're not putting too many limit reference points, too many objectives in terms of targets and that type of thing, and then trying to find a management procedure that will meet all those targets. So as we saw early in this process, all of a sudden you don't have a single management procedure that can meet it because your objectives are too restrictive.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have a nice set of core priority objectives to use. But I think there's also interest in, and I think this is part of the MSAB, is to look at other performance metrics, not necessarily linked to an objective, but, other performance metrics that might provide some insight in, why 46% SPR instead of a 43% SPR when 43% would have a higher catch, 46 would have a similar AAV. What else? Is there something else in there that would help support that decision? And yeah, so, I mean, this is a challenging topic. As we all know, we've had this similar topics in the past. And so it sounds to me.
Alan, we've got a couple of hands kind of stacked.
Oh, good. Yeah.
We had Lynn on there and then Tom.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Apologies, I did have to step out for a couple of minutes. I know we don't have to follow Magnus in IPHC like the North Pacific does, etc. But some of the things we've looked at is the national for our performance, some of our performance metrics, and through that lens, in Area 2A, we have looked at our catch sharing plan and said, okay, we can prosecute safe fisheries. There's some economic viability. We can reduce bycatch. We can do a lot of those things. And we figured out we need, 1 million pounds just as the bare minimum. So looking at that one sentence there, would work for all sectors to me. Work for, what does that mean? The Coast Guard is going to say it's a safe fishery, recreational fishery that they get out and fill their freezer. Commercial fisheries, they're going to make a profit. I don't want to complicate things, but I think there needs to be a little bit more of a qualifier there. And the one I had been thinking of was economic viability there, that would be economically viable for fisheries. But that may be a little too specific. But I really appreciate listening to this discussion.
So yeah, thanks, Lynn. I appreciate that. And we did talk yesterday in our broader set of objectives. We have general objectives related to area specific TCUIs. And so I'm wondering if a paragraph mentioning that area specific minimum TCUIs, maybe that's a good metric to report, such that then you can look at those catch sharing plans and say, okay, this is how it pans out. And then you can then each sector can understand what it means to them. So yeah, thanks, Lynn. I appreciate that.
So it looked like Tom also had his hand up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm getting a little mystified by where we're going on this conversation. I mean, to me, the harvest control policy is to how to control the population so it stays healthy. It's not who gets what TCEY or what area gets how much. Or I think we're getting off track here. I mean, we had like 9 or 10 objectives to start with. the commission pared it down to like 3 or 4. And I don't think they want us to go back and start adding new objectives. I think we can't answer the objectives we've got right now. And I don't even want to think about adding more. But I think, we need to give a harvest control policy that helps the commission manage the current population and into the future without regard to who gets what or how much or where or what economic viability is to them. That, the market will determine that. So I just think we're kind of getting off track in this conversation, and I don't want to see no objectives added back.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I agree. I don't want to see any new objectives added, especially, presenting to the commission about these priority objectives. But I do think in paragraph 46, if, we do develop this new depleted limit reference point, we do really want to think about how is that related to the objectives of the commission, and do we need to add one based on that? And that would be specifically related to the health of the resource. That would be a conservation or sustainability objective. But as we've seen in the analyses, it's not difficult to develop a management procedure that meets those conservation objectives. I mean, one management procedure, I'll tell you, that does meet the conservation objectives is to not fish. So we have to have fishery objectives in this to determine the best performing management procedure. And we have one, the target 36% RSB for a proxy for maximum economic yield. And then we have one, okay, we meet both of those. We still have some management procedures on the table. We could do a number of different things. How do we decide between those? And it's between maximizing the TCY and minimizing the variability in the TCY. So I think those 4 metrics do get us to the right place. But I think we then come to the annual meeting, and the commission is not following the reference that is determined from those 4 objectives. And so we've been thinking, like, why is that? What are the other objectives? And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the commission can just bring in whatever objectives they want in any year that they want. And it doesn't matter to the MSAB or to the MSE process. We just work on those 4 objectives and leave the rest up to the commissioners. But I know personally, I get a lot of emails before and during the annual meeting. It's like, hey, is there something that can help me understand what the TCY in my area would be if we harvested it at 43 versus a 52%? So there are various members interested in other metrics. And I guess the question is, one, the SRB has highlighted developing some fishery performance indicators. They would like the secretary to do that. I'm going to have to report back on why we did what we did or why we didn't do that. And so the MSAB can make a statement on that if they want. Say, nope, we don't agree with the SRB, and we should not be developing performance indicators, fishery performance indicators. Alternatively, the MSAB can say, look, we already have these defined objectives, and I went through those tables yesterday that indicated we have the core ones, but we have additional ones that are actually area specific. And does the MSAB want to note that, look, we already have enough objectives, we already have enough performance metrics, they can be used in this way? And that's what I was trying to get at 49, paragraph 49 here. And then alternatively, another alternative is the MSAB to say, look, yeah, developing fishery performance metrics might be good, but keep it at the coastwide level, or keep it specific to region or area, and simple. Or the MSAB could say, we actually want you to do this and develop them in this way. So I think we do have the simple set, but often simple is not enough when we get into the weeds and the details. And so I'm just looking for how the MSAB would like to phrase this, if at all. We can delete all of this. But, just looking to see what the insight is there from the MSAB.
Yeah, Alan, we've got a couple of hands up, but I'm gonna step in real quick and just say something. So I think there is, like, not defend decisions or anything like that, but I think there is a train of thought that it can also say that it's because of the objectives that the commissioners are departing from the reference point. And I think that has to do with trying to keep biomass from continued decline and, you know, all the other reasons that have been given over the years. The next one, I think that, you know, I'm absolutely interested in what is a TCEY that makes it economically unviable for the under which the fisheries just can't operate. Now, of course, recognizing that that is a regulatory area, user group specific kind of point. You know, like one area can be still going, whereas another area would shut down depending on what the distribution would be. So you know, recognizing that, but I also want to say that, you know, we been pretty clearly directed to not go down that road of distribution among regulatory areas. So while I normally don't do this, I'm going to suggest that fairly strongly that we don't include paragraph 49. That I think we've been directed to keep this at the coastwide level, even though I'm interested in it, of course. And I think that we all are. It's been, at least in my mind, been made pretty clear to us. So anyway, we've got a few hands up. So we've got Chris, Linda, and then Forrest.
All right, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. I think Tom made a couple of good points about, you know, the commission has been very clear and on, you know, we had all these objectives and twice they've basically pared it down and come back and said, no, these are your objectives. We've expanded on these are your objectives. They've been very clear. We're not to discuss distribution. And I think for a number of reasons, that's a good point, because what it does is it pits stakeholder against stakeholder because everyone's looking at what does this mean for my area and my sector instead of what does it mean for the coastwide health of the resource, which is, I think, what we're trying to focus on here. The other point I'd make is that for this, I think we need to keep it simple. We need to keep it straightforward. And I think that dealing with the depleted limit reference point in that discussion is going to take up a lot of our time going forward, and it's going to be a lot of discussion. And I think that we need to keep this at a manageable level. And the question is why the commissioners are deviating from what the MSAB is showing. Well, it's first of all because the commissioners are making, as we've said, short, immediate term tactical decisions, looking at 3-year projection. We're looking at equilibrium, basically long term and so on. So of course we're going to come up with different things, because also they're existing in the current, or whatever we're calling it, current environment, the current productivity environment, whereas the operating model, which we built the objectives on and the metrics, was on an integrated, and which is why I think it would be very interesting, and I think it'd be very useful if the operating model we're able to run and this is what you've been working towards, Alan, is that here's the integrated productivity scenario, and here is the low productivity, or whatever we're calling it. That new, I like that new phrase you came up with it. That way, I think it would help us align the two and better understand and better inform people as to what the decision today in the immediate term, if this productivity regime continues, will mean in the long term. Because like I say, you look at that period in the 60s and 70s, I mean, there was a long time of very low productivity compared to what we saw starting in the late 70s and went into arguably into the 90s. So, you know, we could be in for the long haul here. And so I don't think we should be surprised that the commissioners are coming up with something different than what we're saying at MSAB. Given the current tools we've had, I think the direction you've gone trying to do the different scenarios with respect to productivity will help better inform that discussion. But I think that I agree with the others. Like, we've got to stay away from this area distribution and sector specific, and keep it at coastwide. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Was Linda next?
Yeah, Linda was next. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a really informative discussion. I think when I first put my hand up, I was going to say a lot of what Alan ended up saying, which is that we have a harvest policy, but the commissioners aren't following it, and so helping to make more transparent the considerations that are driving those short-term tactical decisions around, well, spawning biomass is at a place that we're just not comfortable, historic low, don't know it can rebuild, productivity is low, and that they're thinking about catch sharing plans in individual sectors. I thought it would help to find ways for the public to be able to see with some more transparency what guides those tactical decisions through these performance metrics. I mean, I know I understand that tension of we want to keep our objectives out of there. We've been instructed to not look at these regional distributions. So I understand we should probably take 49 out. And I'm just trying to figure out how we meet both of those goals of one, not getting sucked into too much regional or too much short term, but also help to create a harvest policy that is actually followed a lot more closely than it is right now. And maybe Chris, you're right. Maybe the way to get there is through the work that Alan's doing right now around low productivity, and that really helps to elucidate why the commissioners are deviating from the harvest policy we've developed. But I really do feel like that's important. Just not quite sure exactly how we get there.
Thanks, Linda. I feel good because I'm not the only one that's struggling to bring all this together in the best way to make recommendations.
Spitballing an idea, because I think something that Linda brought up was around the communication, I think, in terms of like the why. And wondering whether that falls into something like like one of those guidance documents that we were talking about, in terms of here's all the additional considerations that the commissioners might be taking into account. This is why, and it also ties into the work that Alan, you were saying that you and Ian were planning to work on in terms of how the MSE and the stock assessment models tie together. And so I think a lot of it is communication of considerations as opposed to quantifying and trying to incorporate all of the different pieces, because there are so many different pieces. And I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, I think like there's a difference maybe between, at least in my head, in terms of like the management procedure or the harvest control rule that the commissioners are deviating from, and then the harvest strategy policy, which states that the commissioners can deviate from the management procedure. So I think that also might need to be clarified, maybe just in my head, but that's how I understand the different pieces.
Yeah, thanks, Anne Marie. I think writing that guidance document we get a lot of kickback from commissioners because it's not always clear what they are using every year. It might change from year to year, the considerations that they have. And rightly so, it's a challenging position to be put into. And then but it would be, we've been trying to, at the Secretariat, to present things as there's these management supporting information that's not necessarily the management procedure, not just the stock assessment. There's other aspects of it. Identifying those might be challenging, but you're right. Some sort of document expanding on the harvest strategy policy and what that means to deviate from what we've been terming the reference management procedure, or the reference TCY, is would be an interesting and more transparent document to have out there. Was Forrest have his hand up?
Forrest does have his hand up.
All right, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, I don't
Yep.
think I have background music anymore.
Oh, too bad.
So but I did lose a earbud. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go back in the conversation a little bit and disagree with Tom a little, and maybe just summarize what I'm hearing and what I support, and that's that the commissioners are basically they're operating on objectives that we don't have in our harvest strategy policy. They are avoiding an absolute spawning biomass level that they don't want to go below, but it's not in our harvest strategy policy. And defining depletion and then coming up with what sounds like a reasonable minimum absolute spawning biomass seems like what we're already doing, we're in active doing. And so that I feel like the MSAB needs to weigh in on that, which would be a new objective. And by all rights, we should have fished a lot more aggressively this year because we were meeting our single well-defined biological objective is B20, not going below B20, and we're above that, and we're above B36, and so like we should have fished at F43 this year and taken whatever TCY that produced. So really, what we're saying is we have to describe what we're actually doing, what the commissioners are actually doing, what we're trying to do, and I think that requires the development of depleted level, and it just has to describe where this fleet wants to be, and whether I don't think B36 is as useful as saying we want a coastwide TCY that's between 40 and 50 million pounds, and we're willing to sacrifice long-term yield to hold that, or we want almost zero AAV because we want that stability. And if we'd gone back in time in the mid 2000s, 2005, and known where we were going to be this today, could we have backed off on our SPR to maintain that biomass before we got ourselves in this situation? And I don't think we've addressed those issues. And I think a much more realistic fishery objective is, where do we want TCY coastwide? We don't have to necessarily talk about area specific ones, but I think we need to define that. What are we willing to sacrifice to stay out of this in the future, and what control do we really have over that? And if we don't consider a new objective and we try to stick with what's just in the harvest strategy policy right now, I don't think we're describing that accurately. I don't know if that was helpful or not. That's what I'm seeing, what I'm thinking. And yesterday when we were going to talk about this, I thought I heard from Chris that we really do need to figure out where we want to be and then fit everything around that. So maybe I'm off in left field. I'm just not really picking up on the nuances like everybody else is, but I just wanted to offer that.
Yeah, thanks, Forrest. And I would agree with you, that the whole development of this depleted concept, we should visit or should discuss if there is an objective around this once we have more, once we developed a limit reference point. We need to really have that discussion, like, do we need to develop an objective related to this? How does it fit into the whole thing? And I think we're working towards that. And then I think I'm going to leave it up to the MSAB to decide where they want to go with sector, fishery performance, area specific objectives. And so that is something that, this is where you get to really guide the process.
Yeah, well, and my response to that would be, I think that domestic policy decisions can. I think the IPHC should be responsible, honestly, for picking coastwide TCY, figuring out 2B share, and then country shares, if you will, and then domestic policy addresses regulatory area specific needs.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable staying away from the IPHC trying to manage for regulatory area needs.
So it's something that Forrest just mentioned that was kind of interesting that I was thinking about was that, like what could have been sort of question. And I mean, that's exactly a question that can be answered through an MSE type model to look, but although you may come up with uncomfortable answers to asking a question like that. So I'm not sure, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but just thinking about what could have been had we done X, Y, and Z through those years where there was higher abundance. It's circling back to this paragraph 49. So, Alan, was your intention in writing that? Like, I think the way I'm, rereading it and thinking about it is that coming up with those area specific minimum would then inform what the minimum coast-wide TCEY would then be. Was that kind of your thought process there?
Not necessarily, but I mean, that is a useful way to think about it.
I mean, granted, that's under, whatever that area specific minimum is, that's under a certain distribution scenario that you would then sum up to
Right.
the total.
Right.
But
yeah, and I wasn't trying to bring distribution into that 49, but I see how it can be conflated. And I was just trying to think of it as a a lot of stakeholders come at this like, this is the area that I fish in, and I need this in my area, and other areas need what they need. And so it's a bit of a myopic view sometimes from different stakeholders, not badly, but that is what is important to them. And so I was trying to get at that, but I completely understand the arguments here. And I do want to note that what I'm hearing, though, is that the MSAB's not interested in area specific performance metrics, which means I have to ask the question, do we pull all those area specific objectives that we have worked on, just delete them? And do I pull all the area specific performance metrics out of the MSE Explorer and just leave it to 6 or 7 or 8 performance metrics that you can look at in that Explorer? That's where this conversation was going in my mind.
I would say no to that. Take my hand down. I think there are reasons for looking at area-specific performance indicators of the fishery, of many other ecosystem performance measures that impact halibut. But I'm not in favor of what we do at the PAB, and I'm sure what the conference board does. Linda can attest to that. Chris certainly can, which is exactly that. We go through how much do you think you want? We go around the table, all the representatives of each of the regulatory areas say what they want, and we try to add it up. And if it matches all of our very general idea of what the coastwide TCEY should be, that's what we start to justify. We build our justification around that. I don't think that's a scientifically solid way to go. So for the MSAB, I wouldn't suggest that. I like what you were originally thinking about when you wrote that, Alan. So I guess I would say, no, don't delete what we've got, all the regulatory area-oriented info. And let's just hold on to this idea until we've discussed the depleted limit reference point that we want to get to, because we may find that those, deeper down details, data will help us there.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. That's really helpful. We can also have regional performance metrics as well. And I like you bringing up, this sort of the harvest strategy policy is phrased in a way that it's like, let's develop a coastwide concept, a coastwide TCY, one that is sustainable to the Pacific halibut stock. And that's the first step. We just want to make sure that the TCY coastwide. And then once we do that, we know we have a sustainable TCY. Let's distribute that TCY among the area. So that's how the harvest strategy policy is phrased. And I think it's useful to keep that in mind, because if we approach that with the MSE, which we have been, thinking about it from a coastwide, we're meeting the coastwide objectives, and thus the stock is sustainable. But is that meeting the objectives of all the different stakeholders, all the different sectors? And that is where, we don't have to go down the distribution route of investigating distribution, because we already have to use distribution in these simulations. We are distributing it based on past methods. And we can just look at, based on how the commission has been operating and the decisions they've been making, what do these performance metrics look like for the different regions or the different areas? We don't have to define a minimum TCY, but we can report this is the minimum TCY. And it's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that if we harvested that hard, that this area would do this. It's just like, oh, that's insightful to me. So, we can, but it's hard to not conflate it with all of, distribution. And it's like, well, if that's the minimum TCY, then why don't we just give more to that area? We don't want to go down that route. And so we are sort of poking the bear with a statement on area specific stuff in here.
Thanks, Alan. So we've got, according to the agenda, we're kind of a little past where our planned break was, but we've got a few hands up. I'm wondering, would you want to answer some of these questions now, or do we take a quick break, let this kind of simmer over the break, and then come back and answer these, or go to the people with raised hands?
Yeah, it might be worthwhile to take a break and think about this. This is the last paragraph of what we have in the current draft report. All that we need to do is the other business and then tidy this up. So we have a little bit of time to do this. And I think that I could even use a little bit of time to think about this and provide any guidance to the MSAB, to provide guidance to the Secretariat. So if everybody's okay with that and taking a short break, collecting our thoughts, and then would you want to come back to these paragraphs right now, or should we tackle agenda item 5 and then go into the full drafting of the report and tackle that during the drafting session after we do agenda 5?
I guess my initial thought was like, let's come back to this and try to wrap this section up, and that I think the others will go quickly. But Anne-Marie, if you had a different thought, we can always come back to it in the drafting session. But it seems like people, everybody's brains are kind of rolling on it right now.
Yeah, I agree. And having this tidied up might help in terms of when we want to have the next meeting, or what kind of meeting the next one is going to be.
Sure. Yeah. So what do you think? We have a scheduled 15-minute break with that. And if everybody over the break, if you could keep your hands up on the side thing, we'll kind of come back to you right when we come back. So,
yeah.
But sorry, Pete, is your intent to move off of this section when we come back after break?
No, we're going to come back to this and pick this section back up after break.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Sure. Yeah, we'll come back, wrap this section up, and then go on to 5, 6, and then we'll see where we're at, I guess, at that point.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to do a 10 or a 15-minute break?
Well, so it's pushing on lunchtime down there, huh? So maybe a 10-minute break and then come back.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
All right. How about we come back at 10 to the hour, 10 minutes to 11:50 Pacific time.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back.
All right.
I joined on a second computer so I can see hands and stuff like that as well now.
Oh, cool.
And it's also helpful because I can see that how the document's displayed, and I realized it was probably displayed pretty small. So hopefully it's a
Yep.
little easier to read now.
All right. Well, dive right back in, Alan.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we've got Linda, then Chris, then Tom. Their hands up.
I'll be really brief. Just say I agree with Peggy that I would not support Alan going back and deleting those performance metrics. I think that for at the regional or area level, that those are really important to us understanding how different harvest procedures are performing relative to some of the original objectives. And I'll just leave it there.
Okay, Chris, you were next. Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I just think the discussion prior to the break, I think is a perfect example of what happens when we touch on anything remotely related to allocation between sectors or regulatory areas. And we have to stay away from it. And the commission's been very clear on that. And so I think that what we need to do is get rid of paragraph 47 to 49 and just have in 46, we're going to discuss this depleted limit reference point if it's determined. And I think that we could say, ask the commissioners if they'd be willing to entertain us looking at the fishery objective related to our fish target, which right now is the B36 one, to possibly changing that, because the commission's been very clear. These are the primary objectives. Don't mess with them. They've told us that the last time around. These are your primary objectives. So, and then if they do, then I think we can have that discussion of, is it B36? Do we want B40? Do we want an absolute spawning biomass instead of that? Or do we want a minimum TCY instead of that? You could have that discussion then. But I think, first of all, we got to find out if the commissioners are willing to entertain a change to that. And the one thing I think is, and then the simulations will show us, what the reality is of being able to take the stock to certain levels and what the trade-offs would have to be to get it to those levels. So that's sort of my thoughts at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Just really quick. I think that's a good idea. And perhaps we could wait to have that discussion about fishery objectives once the reference points analysis is redone.
Yeah, good point. Tom, you were up next.
Okay, thank you. I finally got my microphone turned on. I guess I'm puzzled. One, I don't think the commission is deviating from our policy at all. It says in our policy they can deviate whenever they want to. We're making some suggestions to them, and I don't see our control policy as anything hard and fast. It's really a series of recommendations. And I think, but here's where the rubber meets the road to me. I mean, we go in there saying that you can fish at F43, no problem. As Forrest said, well, we're at 38%. We're in good shape. Let's fish at F43. And then I go down a couple pages. I look at Dr. Stewart and his risk table, and he says, okay, go ahead and fish at F43. There's a 79 or 80% chance you're going to drive your biomass stock down the next year or the next 3 years. And the commission is saying, whoa, wait a minute, we can't do that. And so they ended up being at 50, 51, or 52. And we run into that every single year. We're telling them, oh, you can fish way harder than we are. But the biomass is already at what? Spawning biomass is at 158, the lowest in history. And we're telling them, oh, you can fish a lot harder than that. Go ahead and do it. And they're saying, no way we're going to do that. So I see a complete disconnect of what we're telling the commission they can do for the next 10 years and what Dr. Stewart is telling them that this is the risk that you run if you dare do that. And I think they look at it saying, well, your evaluation is maybe fine for 80 years, but it's not going to happen right now, this next year or the next couple of years, or even the next 5 or 6 years. And I think that's what they're running into. They can't believe what we're telling them because that's not what Dr. Stewart's telling them. That's not what the assessments are telling them. So to me, it's not a big mystery to me why they're not following it, because they look at the numbers and say, we don't dare do that. And, on top of that, the Canadians don't accept the surveys. The tribes don't accept the surveys. And so, in order to follow the control rule, the 30-20 rule was worked on every single scenario of those 11 objectives. As long as the 30-20 was there, everything was fine. But, we don't know what 30-20 is because we don't define what that means. So until we define that and to say, when we hit 30, we're going to cut 10% every year and stop fishing at 20. But, that's obviously that's not what we're doing. So anyway, that's my final thoughts on it. I won't say anything more.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And there's a separation. The harvest strategy policy includes that decision-making step, and I think most people are referring to the deviation from the management procedure itself, the reference, and that is what the MSC is informing the management procedure part of it. But you do bring up a really good point. Is that we have developed this 43%, and the MSAB has recommended 46%. Based on these objectives we have in front of us, the priority objectives. And then the commission says, whoa, or, the decision table from the assessment says, oh, you're going to drive spawning biomass, absolute spawning biomass down further. That actually is not an objective that we are working with. And I think that's the disconnect, really. It's not that we're telling them anything different. Well, we are telling them something different because we're not looking at that specific part of it that the commission is looking at. And I think that is why in 46, we can have that part of 46 is really relevant to Tom's comments. Okay, it looks like we have Jim up next.
Yeah, thanks. So, the people said a lot already. I had to add some of the things. People have covered it, but I'll just say that I agree with, as far as we're looking at the actual paragraphs of just taking, what Chris has said and your modifications, keeping 46 and for now, just, 47, 48, 49, just delete them. And I think that may be the prudent thing to do at this time.
But I would agree with you, Jim. And then if somebody has a specific paragraph that they think would be useful for the MSAB to consider and come to consensus on, would be, we're totally welcoming that. Thanks, Jim. Chris, you have another comment?
Oh, just clarify what you meant by that. Another paragraph, sorry.
Oh, if we were to delete 47 to 49 and the part that I've deleted it is day 3, isn't it? Deleted in 46, that, MSAB member might be, but I think we can say it this way. They can propose a paragraph and the MSAB can consider it. I just don't want to make it feel like an MSAB member has to just give up on the topic or whatever, because the SRB did say to develop fishery performance indicators. So I would agree.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about giving up on these. I think the way Chris said it's going back and saying what. But I also think it's a be useful thing to actually go back to the SRB and go like, what are you talking about?
Yep.
Because this has just put us down a rat hole, and a lot of these things we've talked about before, for years. So I don't really, I just think it hasn't been useful, that comment from the SRB, in my opinion.
And, if the MSAB was to note that TCY-based performance metrics are adequate performance indicators, fishery performance indicators, that would be very helpful to me to go back to the SRB.
Say that again.
If the MSAB was to say, the MSAB noted that TCY, that the current TCY based performance metrics used in the MSE process are adequate fishery performance indicators. Just something simple like that without going into details of CPUE isn't because of these reasons. We know why. But having a statement from the MSAB saying we think we have adequate fishery performance indicators would be helpful to put that to rest with the SRB.
Okay, I mean, I can agree to that because we've talked about TCY indicators quite a bit, and that does to be, and I know we talked is you don't have to split it out, but you can say here's okay. I think that's reasonable.
All right, I'm just trying to get that down in there. And I think we still have some hands up. Jim, is there anything else?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. I see, Tom, you still have your hand up. Is that left over there? And that's down. Chris, how about you?
Well, just the comment like this the comments we've heard throughout the meeting that that the commission is doing something different than what the MSAB process is saying, or the results are saying. I'm not sure that we should be surprised by that, because the IPHC process has not adopted a full-blown MSE as how decisions will be made. I mean, that flow chart you put up for us makes it really clear is that the commissioners make a decision, and it's informed by the stock assessment. It's informed by the MSE process, by the MSAB process. It's informed by PAB. It's informed by the conference board. So, and I don't think we should be surprised that Dr. Stewart doing a stock assessment, which is completely different than an operating model closed loop simulation process, which is looking at the immediate term, has a different perspective than something that we're doing here that is looking at short, medium, and arguably long term mainly. So I think the fact that they're differing, commissioners are making a decision different than what some of our results are showing. I'm not sure why we should be surprised by that or be all worked up about it, because it's been pretty clear from the start that this is not a full blown MSE process that IPHC is engaging in. It's not what's driving the decisions.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it is part of the management supporting information. We have developed a harvest strategy policy that has a reference management procedure that's then used by the commission in their decision-making process.
Looks like Linda, you've got your hand up.
I think Linda's hand is down now.
Was that perhaps a legacy?
Oh,
hand?
I'm sorry. Yes, and I forgot to take myself off mute. It just seems to me that what you just added there, what's now 47, is the exact opposite of 48 and of what you just invited members of the MSAB to keep thinking about. So what we're trying to figure out, is there a way we can get at these performance metrics? And now we're saying we're totally happy with what we have. So it just seems like we've had this long conversation about it, and then we say, nope, we're happy. So I think if we're trying to leave it open to develop another sentence or meet the interests of people who have said, we really want to understand this a little more deeply, that just cancels it out. And that I would rather leave it a little more open at this point.
Yeah, I would I see your point, Linda. I think there are different perspectives coming in here. And we can delete any of these paragraphs. I'm putting down some ideas here, and it sounds like many are interested in deleting 48, 49, 50. And then of course I add another one, which just is, I don't know if my adding these ideas is helping or hindering, but if it's hindering, please let me know and I'll stop typing and start deleting.
No, I think it's probably helpful because it puts into words what people are saying, but I think it's just to say we don't have consensus
Yeah.
that we're at 47. I think we also don't have consensus that 48, 49 should stay in. We just haven't resolved this yet. So there are some MSAB members who would support 48, and there's some who would support 47. So I didn't want it to come across as a definitive statement in 47.
I'm trying to find a compromise here.
Yeah, and maybe we just flag it that it's something for further discussion, and that we're not united on this yet. We're going to have to think about it, talk about it more, and leave some ambiguity at this point.
Alan, could you maybe add in there to develop additional indicators for each sector, or somewhere in there that I think that in paragraph 48, for the various sectors part is, I think, something that's interesting.
Well, I don't support having something in there. It hasn't been explained to me about the sectors. I don't see how that would work. So I'm uncomfortable with that being in there.
Okay, fair enough. I think this is the kind of crux of not agreement. So taking it out is fine, and we can work on it as we go.
Can we just say something that the MSAB noted that the current fishery objectives I guess my point is we've got these current fishery performance objectives that are something that the MSAB is interested in further exploring or exploring different options or something, or asking the commission if we can explore different options. I mean, to me, it seems like it depends on where we're going on this, but the thing is, I think there's discussions of, is the B36 right? Should it be something else? Should it be B40? Should it be an absolute number? I think there is discussion around that people are kind of circling at the coast-wide level. So I would make it really explicit to what's in the primary objectives, because we don't want to get into that. We look like we're talking about distribution or anything like that, or what's happening in areas, because that's not what we're dealing with. But I just think it's something that clearly it's a discussion. We started it today. I think it's a discussion that's probably going to have to continue. We're not going to finish it today, obviously, but or just we noted that there needs to be continued discussion on the current fishery performance objectives associated with the primary performance metrics associated with the primary fishery objective, or whatever it is, something like that. Just but I think we have to get some direction from the commissioners. Are they willing to open that discussion? Because they've been pretty clear that these are our objectives. Thank you very much.
And I think just to make sure we're using our terms correctly, there's the priority objectives, which are the 3 objectives, and we call this priority, that have 4 performance metrics, and that's TCY, and the variability in TCY is in the 3rd objective. And then there's primary objectives which is that appendix in the document and presented yesterday, which is the wider set, a slightly wider set that includes some area specific objectives.
Well, I'd stay away from those because I think that we're just going to get ourselves in hot water. I would keep it to the one that is related to the, whatever you call them, the priority objectives.
Yeah. Okay. So the 3 objectives, which is basically just the coastwide TCUI.
Yeah.
And so that is adequate
Well, I
as
think it's
fishery performance indicators.
well, do we include the B36 as I thought that's a fishery performance indicator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, as long as that's included in there, because I think that's what we're circling around is, do people think that is, well, I shouldn't say that. I think it's one thing that it's kind of, it's one of the points discussed today is that where we want to be? Is that a meaningful metric to people? Would people prefer something based on absolute spawning biomass or something based on TCUI, coastal minimum coastwide TCUI? And I think those are all interesting discussions to have, but I don't think we've got there yet in terms of what that actually looks like.
Right. And I think now with the phrasing, the priority associated with priority objectives just completely it gets away from the discussion that we've been having. And I think now 47 saying priority associated with priority objectives is not very useful, according to the discussion that we've been having. In that, I think some MSAB members are feeling that additional fishery performance metrics or indicators, that there are some that may be useful, whether they're area specific or sector specific, or looking at a different measure on the coast wide than just TCY, like a minimum TCY.
Okay, but I think if you're looking at to get things to the area level or even the region level, you have to make some assumptions about allocation. And I know there's ones already built into the operating model based on past decisions. That's a separate thing. If now all of a sudden we're looking at, it turns the discussion from the coast-wide focus to what's best for my area, and it'll turn this rapidly into, and we've seen it in the last hour here, it becomes an allocation discussion.
Yeah. So is it then? Linda made a good comment that said she didn't want to see those area specific performance metrics taken out of the MSE Explorer. And because they are important to understand how the coastwide management procedure operates and trickles down, my wording, to the regulatory areas or even to the regions, which then people can figure out how that would go into their sector. So I guess I bring it back then, Chris, do you feel that we should just remove all area specific performance metrics and not even look at them?
No, well, I think there's 2 points to that. That they're already built into the MSE Explorer. They're already there. You can click the thing and you can see what they are.
But I can remove those.
Yeah, but I mean they're already there. So if people want to look at that, that's great. But I think there has to be an understanding that that's not what's driving the decisions. The driving the decisions are the priority objectives, and that's what we've been told to focus on by the commission. That's what the commission wants to see. People can look at things and determine it, but what it comes down to, does whatever the management procedure we're looking at meet the priority objectives? And then what I'm trying to get at is that priority objective, that's sort of the fishery priority objective around the B36. Is that still correct? Is that still what we think now? Is it, do we think it should be something else or some other different type of metric? And I think we're talking about not adding metrics. If we want to talk about that, it would be exchanging that metric for something else. But
okay,
those are big discussions to have, and those would have to be also, the commission would have to be on side with that.
Yeah. So does then 47 capture that, and the ending statement keeps it open that it is, that we may want to discuss this in the future as the MSE develops? Is that something adequate that the MSAB could agree on?
Works for me. I don't know if you
go ahead with that. So you're talking about then taking out 48, 49, 50?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Finish at 47.
Yeah. I'm just leaving them there because I just want that for I'll do that. They would be deleted. God, this probably looks terrible, but
And it's all about looks, really.
So I just have to say that I really can, I hear what Chris is saying, and I agree that we need to stay away from distribution. But I think there's some huge benefit in being able, as part of the MSE process, to look at, or to be open about looking. It's a huge range, and to be open to looking at how 4B performs, for instance, in terms of migration or something that is not distribution. We're really, I feel, 6 times burnt on even venturing, talking about distribution. So maybe I'm alone, but no, I think Chris is with me. But I do think most members agree that this is not something that MSAB will be doing. But I don't think we should turn our back on being open to further information, and that's kind of what I was thinking this all was about, 48 to 50, was to gather more information so that we could be a little bit better at communicating why one TCEY option is better than another, for instance, as not as a member of MSAB, but as a member of the PAB or as just a stakeholder. So, I mean, that's what I feel like a little bit my obligation is to my constituents, is to help them know what kind of information is going to help them. And this feels like we're turning our back on an opportunity that we maybe shouldn't until we know a little bit more about what we want to do with it.
yeah, thanks, Peggy. I appreciate that. It's not so much about what's driving the MSE process, but some of it is also what is informative to your constituents.
Mm.
I wonder if we should try to move this along so that we, it would be beneficial if we, over the lunch period, I was able to sort of create the penultimate report so that after lunch we could just go through it and adopt it. But if that's not possible, we can do this in the afternoon, but I'll probably need like a half an hour to clean this up so that people really see it, so that when we do adopt it at the MSAB, that I don't have to make a lot of changes to clean it up and things like that. So I need a little bit of time once we finish drafting the entire report to do some cleanup. And I was planning to do that over lunch, but we can do differently if desired.
I agree. I think it would be nice to be able to move along on this now. Can we get, I guess I want to make sure the MSAB is agreeable to paragraph 47 as it stands. And then we can move on to other business and go to lunch. Can I get people's thumbs up that they are okay with paragraph 47? Okay.
Yay.
Not seeing any thumbs down.
As a point, Alan, you've mentioned the word informative several times. Why don't you just change the word adequate to informative? I think that's a very helpful statement.
That's a good point. Any objection to that?
Cool. Okay. Not seeing any. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead, Alan, and move on to the agenda item 5 there.
Okay. So I just wanted, I've deleted that. And then after we do agenda item 5, it would be useful. We'll just have to make sure we draft the report so that I can come back with the penultimate version. So that is saved. So all that we'll need to do is add into paragraph 48 down here, unless we have some other things we discuss. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and just bring it back to this. All right, well, thanks everybody for that discussion. That was really good. We haven't had a discussion about objectives, performance metrics in a while, so I'm glad that we were able to do that. And that brings us to agenda item 5. I don't have a presentation for this, but this is the other business. Typically, it includes really anything we haven't covered. And one thing we often discuss is when the MSAB would like to have another meeting, meaning MSAB 23, because we're in MSAB 22 now. Is that something the MSAB would like to make a recommendation to the commission to hold one in October? We do not have one on the schedule at this point in time. And I actually forgot what they have done at the annual meeting. There is a calendar from the annual meeting that I'm just going to take a quick look at. I think. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know that the commission has made a recommendation on the next MSAB, or they don't have one scheduled for October. But the MSAB can make a recommendation when they would like that next MSAB to occur. And yeah, and so it helps to know some dates that won't work for people, like, you know, when Pacific Council, North Pacific Council are, and things like that.
Yeah, I guess the question I have, Alan, is, and you know, given that we're kind of in this period of, you know, you're updating the operation model, and we're, you know, you're in this phase of adjusting it to the new assessment, and then kind of looking into this concept of depletion, and you'll be talking more about that next week at the SRB. Is it, like, I guess 2 questions. One, is it helpful for you for us to have an October meeting to support what you're working on? 2, is there, you know, what could be some of the topics that we would talk about with you in October?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really good way to think about it, Pete. And I think that we there wouldn't be actually a lot there'd be a lot of information for me to present to the MSAB, but I don't know where the MSAB would have any specific requests or recommendations in terms of that. And so, you know, we could discuss where the work's at, and then more specifics to the work plan, which would then happen again in the May MSAB meeting. So I think personally that an informational session could work again, so that people are informed of the progress of the MSE, and they can take that to the annual meeting. But that's my opinion, and I think there's some hands up.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Okay, yeah, Chris, Jim, and then Lynn.
Yeah, my thinking would be sort of along the lines just what Alan was saying. I think sort of an information out, understand sort of work progress to date, what some of the results, if any, are showing, and then I think an understanding of what is going to be presented at the interim meeting with respect to this, or will be presented to commissioners, or if there's been some direction from commissioners from the work meeting or whatever it's called that they have in September. So I think there's a few things could be updated there, and just making sure we understand what's going to be brought to the interim meeting, and that we're all in alignment with that. So I'd like to see an October meeting. Thanks.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, pretty much what Chris said. I think an October meeting it was useful. last year. And I think especially with a lot of the stuff that, you're working on, Alan, and that, I think it'd be useful just even at the minimum understand where you're at and maybe where it might be going. I would say the week of October 19th to the 26th would be not useful for me for a meeting in those timeframes.
Great, thanks, Jim. I'll also note the North Pacific meeting is the week of October 5th through the 13th.
2nd through the 9th with the SSC, AP, and council.
Lynn, you were up next.
You stole a little bit of my thunder. The Pacific Council meets September 17th through the 22nd. Then on my calendar, I have dates for North Pacific the 5th through the 14th. I don't know how many people are involved in this process, but the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission annual meeting is later this year. It is September 28th through 30th. So those are sort of big policy type meetings that might have other people involved in them that I have on my calendar.
All right, Forrest, you were up next.
Alan, did you say how far you think you might be on work on depletion levels by October? Or any kind of a depletion threshold?
I think I'll have made pretty good progress. I would like, it's quite a bit of work to do though, so I can't really say, but I would like to present something to the SRB in September on the depletion simulations. But
okay, and what did
be time consuming because they're going to take a lot of simulations.
Okay, and when did you think would be an appropriate time for us to have a preliminary? So I think we've decided today that before we start talking about absolute spawning biomass levels as an objective, we want to solidify that. And I just wondered if it would be an appropriate time in October to have a preliminary discussion after having seen some of your work, or if we're just going to wait a year from now to have any discussion on this.
To have that discussion about an objective, it might be best to wait until the commission has seen the simulation results and see if they've actually adopted a depleted limit reference point. Because once they have a depleted limit reference point, I think that'll anchor us in the discussion of the objective. It'll just help with that discussion. So I don't think waiting until May to have that discussion is probably reasonable. Having that discussion about that objective in October might be a little premature and guessing what the commission might decide. So I don't see that as a bad thing.
Okay, thanks. And I do support an October, at least informational meeting. Thank you.
Linda, and then Peggy.
I was just going to add Board of Fish work session for Alaska Board of Fish is 28th, 29th of October, which is making it sound like October is pretty darn booked. And I was just wondering if early November, there just weren't many days in between everything, all the other meetings on there. Halloween, I don't know. Maybe starting to look at early November might be more workable.
Alan, how does October 14th through the 18th? It's kind of a tight window, but that gets Jim in and doesn't interrupt the North Council meeting.
Yeah, I think that looks fine for me right now.
I'm okay with November too. It's just that things really start to stack up.
Yeah, the IM is actually going to be on December 1st, which is, I think, during the North Pacific meeting. So, the first week in November would still be a couple of weeks away from the IM at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to keep my October calendar pretty clear. I don't see much happening in there right now.
That seems to be happening frequently. Is those overlap the IM and the North Council meeting? Is there a way to avoid that?
Boy, yeah, Ian and I sure wish there was, but
Okay.
that's I think I think there's some conflicts amongst commissioners that they've been having challenges with that, and so I think the only option was to really schedule it during the SSC meetings.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think this is helpful. It seems like the MSAB is in support of an informational meeting, potentially mid-October or first week of November. Does anybody have conflicts that first week of November? Say that would be November 2nd to the 5th or 6th. And then would a 1 day like we did last October be sufficient? Just a virtual 1 day meeting? I thought it worked pretty well.
Yeah, I also see Forrest and Linda have hands up.
Oh, okay. And Peggy. No. They're coming up and down. There they go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me too, like, I guess I leaned more towards the first week of November than trying to squeeze in October, but October could work also.
This is helpful. We'll just put some indication in the report, and then before the meeting, because who knows what my calendar in October is actually going to look like. It's quite a ways away. I'll send out a poll, and then we'll find a good date for the informational session. But knowing those absolute no-go dates is helpful start. Okay. Any other business anybody has or would like to discuss or bring up that we haven't talked about?
Alan, the only thing that sort of popped to mind was there were some discussions along the way about MSC Explorer display, and just wondering whether you wanted to carve out a little bit of time for specific requests or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do is I plan to work on improving the MSC Explorer and updating that. And I don't remember any specifics on that, but if somebody has specifics about ideas on improving the MSC Explorer, I'm totally open to those. We can have that discussion during MSAP, but I'm also just feel free to email me or call me or talk to me directly, and we can go over people's ideas, because that tool is really meant for everyone, and I want to make sure it's accessible and good for everyone.
Sounds good. There was a hand, I think it was Chris, but it seems to have gone down.
Okay.
Yeah, well, if we can just send you comments. I mean, I guess the thing is, for me on the MSC Explorer, I found for the SPR52 was the only one I could get to come up to show the chart of low productivity, integrated productivity. So it could have been something on my end. And then the other one is just, is there a way, I think it's useful to overlay the low productivity and the integrated productivity scenarios, but is there a way also to produce separate charts? Like this is the integrated one, and this is a separate chart with the low productivity? Just because sometimes to kind of drill into the details on that and really kind of look at stuff, it can be challenging. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And that is one area that I really want to improve, is that, and I want to make it more interactive, and because right now it's just fixed figures, and I tried to make them all have the same y-axis, and so they end up being really small. But I do want to make that, I do want to improve that. That's on my plan to improve that section for sure. And I believe it was you've been very helpful in producing those plots, provided some insight last year. So if you're okay, and any other MSAP member as well, maybe we can just work on improving that section of the MSC Explorer individually, and I'll reach out to you, Chris, and see if there's any you have any suggestions as I'm working on it, and get your advice. And anybody else, just feel free to say, hey, look, MSC Explorer color scheme is terrible. Just let me know. It's easy to change.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, and I do want to improve those plots, and I do want to make it a little bit more interactive with plotting. So I have some ideas that I've been working on.
And Linda has her hand up too.
Linda,
Sorry about that. It seems
problem.
to have gone up by itself that time, but I didn't mean to have it up.
All right. What was next?
Well, I think that's it. We just, I think all that we have to now in the drafting session of the report, which, so we just had scheduled a drafting session before lunch. Yeah, before lunch, so that over lunch I could create that penultimate version for us to go through and adopt the report. So I think that we could do that if people are okay to hang on another 10 minutes, and then we'll break for lunch, and then we can decide when to come back. And I think we could end the day a little bit early today, if we do this. Let me really quickly just save this as a new version. And then I'll bring that up on the screen. We'll draft the paragraph for the informational meeting. And then I think we can take a lunch. So while I'm bringing this up, think about how long people would like to take lunch. And if you want to come back maybe a little bit early, to end the day maybe a little bit earlier as well. Make sure that looks like it does. All right, I'm going to share this. And okay. So we're actually in an official still section or official MSAB meeting during this drafting session. So if we do want to bring, have some discussion about things before this penultimate version, we can. But I think what we just discussed was the MSAB recommended. Keep that one there for a second. Do we have confirmation about the date on the NPFMC meeting in October? I heard a couple of different ending dates on that one. Oh, wait.
I just checked the website and it said 5 to 13, but I haven't looked to see if that included SS.
Oh, and the 14th might be travel day too. So,
right. Okay.
Yeah, what I heard just with Peggy was that the SSC meeting might be earlier than the 5th.
Okay.
But I don't know. I haven't. I think Linda brought that up.
I think you're right about the 5 to the 13th. I think I had June meeting dates in my head before, so my apologies. You're correct, Pete.
And I'll put in Alaska Fish as well. That was Alaska Fish, right, Linda?
Yeah, the Board of Fisheries, Alaska Board of Fish.
Yeah, Alaska Board of Fish. Oh, that's good. Yeah, because that one, I'm not as aware of that meeting. So thanks for that. I'll have to clean up these dates and write it out appropriately. So that captures, wow, I never thought about that. It seems to me that I always say a 1-day virtual meeting. Is it supposed to be an 1-day virtual?
I seem to recall for like that it is a and when it's before a vowel.
Yeah, but it just doesn't sound right to me.
And one day, I know it doesn't. I don't say it that way.
Yeah.
Well, now you got a double blue line under it again, so I don't know.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it says A.
Hey, well, there you go.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Word knows best, right? Okay. So I think if we're okay with this paragraph, I think it's fine for me. I'll just clean it up a little bit, and and this gives the Secretariat the information they need to then put out a poll and determine the exact date. Does the MSAB want to make a recommendation about the 23rd session of MSAB, or note that it is scheduled to occur in May of 2027? Or just should I delete 49? The calendar presented at the annual meeting has the MSAB meetings only occurring in May.
I think we can. So I guess referring to your term of poking the bear a little bit, I was thinking this morning, just in terms of like kind of the somewhat small amount of attendance that we had at this meeting. If there's somewhere in there that we can note, like,
yeah,
having an in-person option for these meetings promotes participation, and I'm not sure exactly how to say it, but just having that option might be something that could encourage more participation.
Do we want to make that as a recommendation so that the commission is aware of it? If it's a note, they, won't be presented. We'd have to make sure it's presented to them as a recommendation. It would be very clear.
I'm for that.
Linda, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I suppose we're locked into May. I mean, May is just fishing season for me. I don't know who else on here is trying to do that and this at the same time. Maybe it's not possible to think about April, but going along, I would also support having an in-person option, but maintaining the virtual option as well if we go that route.
Yeah, and I totally understand, Linda. If there's, and maybe now that we're doing just one major MSAB meeting or one official MSAB meeting a year, we could go to April. I think part of the issue was, we have 30-day deadlines for all the documents. Holding a meeting in April means the documents are due in March, which is, very little time after the annual meeting to actually accomplish anything. So it would be coming to the MSAB in April with very little additional information that was presented at the annual meeting. But that might be okay because we could really start working on things. We'd be aware of the commission direction and then really work on things. And the MSAB could make the request to the Secretariat and guide the Secretariat on the work they're doing. So I'm trying to think, is there anything else in April? Yeah, I mean, April would work for me. It's just I wouldn't have much time after the annual meeting to accomplish much. And really, starting November, I don't have much time to work on specific things because we're in meeting mode. But I think that would be okay.
Lynn, did you have?
The Pacific Council has a pretty heavy meeting usually in the first couple of weeks of April every year. I can find those dates if need be.
I think I could just say here late April or May in 2027. Does that
If
sound
we,
reasonable? Go ahead.
if we changed B greater to increase, would you
Yeah.
be comfortable with that?
No, I literally I write this stuff just spewing it out. So
That was
please
pretty good.
correct me. I like to get words on the page and then massage it after that. So
Yeah.
attendance and engagement would likely increase when holding the meeting in person. So, okay, the MSAB's recommending a one-day info session in mid-October or early November. The MSAB's noting that the 23rd session of MSAB is scheduled to be held over 2 to 3 days in May 2027 with a virtual option. And the MSAB's recommending holding an MSAB 23 in late April or May of 2027 in person with a virtual. Is there a better way to maybe phrase this in person part of this? The MSAB recommending holding, should we say it holding in person here with a virtual lesson? Holding
And in person?
Yeah, in person.
That's better.
We use the phrase hybrid all the time.
Oh yeah.
Hybrid meeting with in-person and online options available.
Yeah, I sort of want to really highlight the in-person here, so I think I'm going to keep that in, if that's okay.
Just one thing on late April. I don't know if it matters, but Seafood Expo Global in Barcelona is the week of the 19th of April, I think.
Oh, okay.
Just so we're aware of that. Yep.
No, that's good. Would you prefer the last week of April, or would that be too? Is April still an option then, I guess?
Well, right now, last week of April works for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think we want to avoid that.
But that's just one person.
I agree with that.
How's that?
That looks good.
Okay. Anything else under other business? If not, I think we can break for lunch. I will just make sure the report looks good, is formatted correctly, fill in participants and the appendices, and then after lunch, we can walk through paragraph by paragraph.
Okay. I guess I lean towards a shorter. We have an hour and a half scheduled for lunch today. I guess I lean towards a shorter lunch just to be able to knock this out and get it done. I'm only one of many though, so I encourage any other opinions.
Well, I can make a suggestion. We return at either 1:30 Pacific time or 1:45 Pacific time.
I'm good with that.
I'm a vote for 1:45.
Okay.
So I'm not going to be able to attend the afternoon. I have to leave at 1:30 for a doctor's appointment. But if I have any great thoughts, I'll send them to you, Alan, by
Okay.
email.
Yep. Sounds great.
Thanks.
Anne Marie, does that work for you too?
That works.
All right. So we'll return 1:45 Pacific time, a little bit less than an hour. With that, we can begin walking through the report of the 22nd session of the IPHC Management Strategy Advisory Board. We have all this beginning stuff. Once the report's adopted, as I just make sure it's formatted, I'll add any acronyms that are in there that need to be added. So we don't have to worry about that right now. Remembering there's terminology, different levels, recommended, request, formal, informal, agreed, noted, considered, urged. I'll fill in the executive summary once the report's adopted. Update the table of contents. And that brings us to the paragraphs. And this is what we'll walk through. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. There. Is that okay on the screen for everybody? All right, not seeing any objections. So let's look at paragraph 1 of updated with the actual numbers. There's 23 board members, positions, 14 attended. And there were 4 observers in the process. And those are all listed in the appendix 1. I opened it up. So paragraph 1. And just stop, chime in if you have any comments or suggestions. Paragraph 2, I just noted that apologies were received. There were a number that did not attend, and I sort of lost track of those that had actually informed me they were not attending. Okay, 3 is just recalling the role of the MSAB and the IPHC rules of procedure. Let's paste it in. And then 4 is the MSAB recalled that the management strategy evaluation process, stakeholder informed, scientifically driven. That's good. We adopted the agenda, adding a presentation from William Lay and Dr. Ann Boudreau. And that updated agenda is actually in Appendix 3. I added that agenda item. We had an election of chairpersons, noting that the previous chairpersons expired. Pete, I put a note in my calendar when your expiration occurs, so hopefully I'll be on top of it next time. With that being said, what's that?
I should do the same thing.
Yeah. Or maybe we should just hope you forget and just keep doing it indefinitely. And then the MSAB noted that Dr. Pete Hulson was nominated, seconded, and elected as co-chairperson of the MSAB, ending 12th of May, 2028. The nomination for a Canadian co-chair will be forthcoming, and thank you to Anne Marie for stepping up and serving as the co-chair for MSAB022. I thought you did a great job, Anne Marie. I really appreciated it, and really appreciated your summaries at the end of the day. Those were very helpful. Okay, and that brings us to 9, thanking Gwen for her service as Canadian co-chair. All right, moving on to 2.3, paragraph 10, thanking Anne and William for their presentation. and 11, noting that they will invite some MSAB members to interview, and members may contact them. I've put in the link here to the info presentation, and that's posted on the MSAB website now, so you can view that at your will. Paragraph 12, MSAB membership. 13, next expirations occur at the end of this year. Welcomed Ms. Courtney Young and Mr. Doug Duncan. Unfortunately, I don't think Doug was able to join this meeting. Did he come on at any time? Did you know, Pete, or anyone notice?
I did not notice. No, I don't think he was able to make it.
I'm sure he's keeping pretty busy there at the region.
Yeah, he had like supervisor training or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then paragraph 15 is noting there are vacancies on the board and that stakeholders can submit EOIs, and then Secretariat will collate those and provide them to the commission periodically. Okay. Paragraph 16, noting this paper 04 and progress from MSAB022 requests. And then recalling, or 17, that the MSAB would consider and revise as necessary these actions, which they've done. And then 18 is recalled those requests, and those are quoted here in verbatim from the MSAB022 report. Outcomes of the 102nd in paragraph 19. The MSAB noted paper 05 that just detailed the outcomes of the 102nd session relevant to the mandate of the MSAB. All right, I'll slow down now that we're in the main agenda items, and I'm not going to read the paragraphs, but I'll state them, maybe summarize it, note any changes I made, and then we'll just continue to move on. So if you have any comments, just feel free to speak up. Paragraph 20, noting the paper 06. Paragraph 21, the MSAB welcomed the adoption of the IPHC Harbor Strategy Policy. And I've put in the correct date there. Now 22, paragraph 22 was something from this morning that we said, oh, we should probably write something about that. And then we never came back to it. So I wrote this paragraph. The MSAB noted the description of depleted in the Harbor Strategy Policy, and that the term recovered can be used to identify when a stock has recovered from a classified depleted state. So I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that. And if there's no objection to that, I'll unhighlight that. I've just highlighted it because it was a change from what we talked about this morning.
You might just want to switch and say from a state classified as depleted.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Forrest. Okay. And 23. Uh, 24 spans the page there. '24 does contain a request. Okay.
Do we have the mirror request for depleted and recovered?
Because there's not actually a limit, I think we have something similar coming up.
Okay.
That I think the process is after we the MSAB talks about the simulations to determine the limit reference point, and then I think there's something that might actually be the new paragraph below too.
Okay.
Keep that in mind, Amory. If you don't see that, we can come back.
All
right. Okay. So
Alan, is it requested? Does it switch? Oh, is it always past tense or requests?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes, you're right. Thanks for catching that. Okay. Moving on to 25. And then 26. And 27. Those are good requests. I like those requests, just, indicating things that will help you interpret outputs. Okay, and we're on to 28.
I have my hand up, but maybe I'll just jump in if.
Yeah, please.
Not really looking for an edit there, but just to note that I ground truth this by some processors because I expected they would not support bigger variability at high levels because of what it can do to markets, and they didn't like that idea. I mean, I know it just says may, so I don't see that we may or may not be acceptable, but just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, is there any suggested edit or anybody have, or are we okay with this paragraph 28?
Well, I had a question on, and it might have been happening in the part of the meeting I missed, but we talk about the hierarchy of fisheries objectives can change depending on product. What do we mean by that? Because the conservation or the objectives are the ones that are hierarchical, and that doesn't change, does it? What do we mean by that?
Well, yeah. So the first objective is that there's only one conservation objective in the priority objectives. That's the B20%. The B36% is a fishery objective, and then within objective 3 is are these two concepts of AAV and TCY. So yeah, maybe you're right, Chris. Maybe we were talking about the importance of the different objectives. So, but I don't know, the conservation objective will always remain at the top of the hierarchy. So
what if you just said something like the importance of performance metrics, or whatever the right term is, within fishery objectives can change depending on productivity, something like that. Can change or may change or could something, I don't know. And would it change depending on productivity regimes, or would it change simply based on changes in TCY? I mean, I know that the two are related to each other, but or maybe we're getting too much into the weeds here and we should just leave it.
What if we said the size of the stock instead of productivity regimes? But I don't know. I think productivity regimes is okay, because I think that was the discussion we were having, Chris, is that if we are in a high productivity regime, we may interpret some of these metrics differently, or may classify them in a hierarchy differently, or have their importance come out different.
Okay, but I find leave it, but my only comment would be we could be in a high productivity regime, but find ourselves below SB20, for example, if we did something wrong. But you know, I wasn't here. I don't think I was here for that discussion, or maybe I blanked it out. I'm fine with what's written, the changes you've made. If everyone else is good with it, I'm good with it.
Yeah, those are good points. And yeah, this discussion occurred on day one, and it did center around productivity. But I see your point. But I think part of it too is, you know, in those higher productivity regimes, you might expect faster recovery or something like that as well. Any objection to these changes for 28? Courtney
I'm
has her hand
wondering.
up. Or go ahead.
So I'm wondering whether, in terms of whether it's productivity only, because I think that when I brought it up originally, it was also around like the actual abundance or the actual TCEY. So it's more about the context. And then when we had the discussion, it was also, I believe, like Forrest was mentioning, it's like, well, it also depends on what happened in the previous couple of years in terms of like maybe if we had a few high years, then a bigger change may or may not be okay. And so there was just a lot of discussion around context. And so it's not necessarily the productivity in specific. It's sort of, it's all of the things I think that we're trying to put our fingers on in terms of identifying a management procedure that makes sense in all circumstances, and realizing that, you know what, there's probably not a management procedure that makes sense in all circumstances, and this is why we have commissioners.
Yeah, would it be, I mean, I do remember it was sort of phrased around productivity, but I see your point that it's not necessarily productivity. Would it, maybe it would be best to say, depending on the state of the stock, for example, productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll take out this trends part. Chris, do you have another comment? I see your hands up. And then, okay, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I heard the previous comment from, sorry, I didn't catch the woman's name there, about processors and their opinions on AAV and higher TAC levels. I thought it was it said that that was like that statement as written was not true?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, like would it be, oh, sorry, please go ahead.
I mean, it does say may be acceptable.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's not true. If we were saying will be acceptable, I just was saying what I heard from processors is may not be acceptable too, because how that can impact markets and prices.
I think leaving it as written then is a bit dangerous, because I think it is really suggesting it to be true. I wonder if maybe we could just be more general, like for example, AAV may differ based on varying TCEY levels or something, because that could be, you could, you know, use that sentence putting in high or low wherever you need to. But I don't know if that will still work. It's not exactly giving much of an example at that point. But I do worry about leaving it as written, where we just kind of found out that, you know, folks wouldn't agree with the statement.
I think it sort of has to be written by like this, because it's talking about objectives and performance metrics, and what is acceptable, you know, what would be an acceptable level. Does adding the to some participants help with that?
You could just say, for example, tolerance to AAV could vary depending on TCY. because then it doesn't talk about higher AAV. That could also be lower AAV. And maybe that's not quite it, but that kind of concept.
I think that's better.
So for example, tolerance to AAV. How about tolerance to interannual variability? We'll get rid of these acronyms. May vary at different TCEY levels. How's that? I'm going to switch to simple view so we can see what it actually looks like. Simple markup. So looking at 28. Importance of performance metrics.
I like it.
Any objection to 28? All right, let's move on to 29. This is what we worked on earlier today, and this is what the final bit looks like. Okay, 30. And 31.
I just had I was just looking at 31 and I wonder if just noting, so that last sentence there said, this may be due to different Pacific halibut behaviors in recent years not captured in the OM, such as those related to.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Just noting that it's kind of a model specification.
Yeah, perfect. And then how about we change it, which could be related to movement rates or recruitment distribution.
Yeah, looks good.
Cool. All right. Anybody else on 31? Okay, 32. I really like 32, especially with the specification years and the immediate term. I like that. All right, 33. I like 33 because, I like at the MSAB is a real opportunity to step back and review how things work in the IPHC management world. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. All right, so that's agenda item 4.1.
Alan, I did have my hand raised to that. 33.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that like I think I was part of the group that brought it up or spoke to this, and I've tried to understand before how areas as fleets long and short, like what sense they give us, because they look at things a different way and they omit or add different assumptions. And what does this describe some understanding of that? Like if you responded to this, if this was granted and you prepared for this, would we understand a little bit more about how long and short and areas as fleets or coastwide, like when we look at those 4 different models before they get integrated to a single line, it'd be helpful to know, or maybe it wouldn't be helpful. I don't know. You guys would know. Like, is it too in the weeds for us to even understand the different elements of the 4 ensemble models and what they take a look at?
I don't think that's too far in the weeds. The stock assessment document does present that each individual model quite a bit more than Ian presents it. So is this capturing that for us, how an ensemble improves our understanding of the Pacific halibut stock? Or do you want more specifics in there on how each individual model can be interpreted?
Or how each model looks at the stock differently. I know when we ran a black and blue line going back, when we talk about basically areas as fleets or coastwide, and whether looking in hindsight, we believe like we were overfishing or underfishing, because each of those 2 models, long models, looked at different elements or made different assumptions, and just a basic overview of how each model takes a little bit different look at something.
Yeah, no, that's great. I get that. And I think this is helpful.
Okay.
Is this capturing? I think we have how an ensemble improves our understanding, how each individual model may help with interpretation. Yeah, this will be good for Ian and myself to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on 33? We okay with the additions? Excellent.
I don't think we need it, but doesn't matter whether it's in there or not to me.
Okay. Then we'll keep it in there. Yeah, the 23rd session is going to be a year away. It's good to have a reminder. All right, so 34 is the document 07. 35, the high and low priority topics. 36, recalling these paragraphs, these 2 paragraphs from the AM102 report. Please let me know if you see any typos or anything like that as well. I noticed I was saying depleted instead of deleted. Okay, 37. This is a good request here. Give you a second to read it, a few seconds. Okay. 38, constraints and smoothers, referencing paragraph 37. And keep that all on the page for 39, referencing paragraphs 37 and 38. All right. Not hearing anything there, not seeing any hands. Let's move on to 40. Now we're getting into the simulations to determine depleted limit reference point. Uh, 41, I think this is getting at what you were, that you brought up earlier, Anne Marie. And I think it's highlighted blue because we hadn't fully thought this out earlier today, and I just completed the sentence. We okay with 41 then?
Just a question about the term declared. Did we use classified earlier?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, how was that
I
word?
defer to you to what's more correct, but maybe we should be consistent.
How about we use declared here? Identify when a stock has recovered from a state declared as depleted. Does that make sense? And then there's consistency. I see it as a declaration. Okay, we've seen the results. The stock we declare as depleted or declare as overfished. Okay, if we're all right with 22, I'll move back down. Thanks, Courtney.
So declared is better than defined? Defined as depleted?
I think that's a good point. I tend to use the word declare because the commission would actually declare it as depleted, but defined is a statement that would say the harvest strategy policy is defining it. So I don't know. What's the preference of the MSAB? I think you have the opportunity to influence the future right here.
I think defined because it'll end up in the harvest strategy policy.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. So yeah, and it actually says the HPSP defines that an overfished stock would be considered. Yeah. So state defined as depleted in 22. This is good. It's helping me get my terminology in line. Is defined as depleted. Does that make sense?
Maybe it's after having been defined as, because otherwise it sounds like
Yeah.
it's both recovered and depleted at the same time.
Yep. I'm going to go to simple view so we can see the paragraph. There it is, 41. I like it. Okay. Can we move on to 42 then? Any objections to moving on to 42? Looks like we're good. Here we have declared again. Should we change these declared to defined? It's with the, it is becoming a little, oops. Switch back. see the markup. Okay, to be used to understand the interaction between overfished and depleted. How about we change the structure of this a little bit to make it a little bit more clear? Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, any thoughts on 42? I'll leave it like this, then I'll switch to simple view.
I think it's okay. I think if you wanted to make it a little more clear, you could say, e.g., when would a stock be defined as overfished, but not depleted, and vice versa, or something. But if people
Yeah.
feel like this is clear enough as is.
Any support for Linda's change?
I think that was clear. I think Linda's suggestion is clearer.
Okay. So when could, how did you phrase that, Linda?
I think I said when would or when could a stock be defined as overfished but not depleted, and vice versa, or if that's necessary.
Okay, I'm going to switch to simple view so we can see the actual sentence. 42, we're on 42.
You have 2 periods at the end of the sentence, but other than that,
Oh
it's
yeah,
good.
thank you. Okay, thanks for that. 43. That determining a depleted limit reference point may help with development of objectives. Linda, is your hand up for something new or? Okay.
Nope, sorry.
No problem. I do that all the time. All right, 43.
Oh, sorry. Do we want to add? Oh, yeah. So 243. Do we want to add determining a depleted reference point and a recovered level may inform the development of?
Yeah.
Because you sort of want to pair the two together.
Yeah. And how about in a method to determine when recovered? Because if you think of it from the overfished perspective, the overfished and the rebuilt levels are actually the same. They're both 20%. It's just the method to determine the the certainty level.
That works.
Okay. That determining a depleted method and a method. Do we want to use determine there or some other word? It's a good synonym. Yeah, I think it's fine. Any suggestions or objections? Okay, 44. All right. 45. Okay. And then 46. You notice that the last part of 46 was deleted after discussions this morning. Now it's just focused on depleted level and absolute spawning biomass.
I'm going to jump in. I have my hand up, but
Oh, yeah.
I've tripped over this a bunch of times, and I feel like the goal will always be to be above this depleted absolute
Oh, yeah.
spawning biomass, and the at makes it sound too much like a goal.
And yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that the absolute spawning biomass here is meant to be separate from the depleted limit reference point. So this could be a different value. But I see how it could be linked. And how about if we wrote potentially and a greater and a
So this isn't an absolute spawning
depleted.
biomass.
Depleted is an absolute spawning biomass, but we could
Right.
define a depleted reference point and a different absolute spawning biomass to be at or above. So we could define, just as we've done with the RSB 20% and RSB 36%. And so how can we make that clear in this sentence?
And maybe a question back to our original discussion this morning is, do we actually want to have because we're now adding a bunch more objectives? Sorry, Linda, I think I started to jump in on top of you.
Oh, no, that's fine. To me, it was, no, go ahead.
I think that's just pretty much me wondering, because we had this discussion in the morning in terms of having a lot of different objectives. And so I'm not sure that we landed on wanting to identify like a target absolute spawning biomass, which is how I'm interpreting this to be.
We definitely had that discussion. I think we also had the discussion that once we do determine a depleted limit reference point, that it sort of does open up not the opportunity, so the necessity to have this discussion. Like, now, do we need to have an objective related to that as well? Or does that need to replace the current RSB one as a conservation objective?
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't think, I know there's a lot of discussion about, oh, we have 3 objectives and we can't have any more. I don't think that should preclude us from having discussions about the objectives that are appropriate as priority objectives.
So, Alan, from your perspective, would the idea be to develop, say, so we have RSB 20, RSB 36, and overfishing, and then we would essentially have like in the absolute zone, we would have the depleted, the absolute spawning biomass that we're talking about here, and then, I'm missing another one.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any overfishing. I
Okay,
don't
thank you.
think there would be another one. Yeah.
And so would the idea be to either use this column, or would we be trying to use them both?
I think that's the discussion to be had.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's an important discussion because we've defined this new concept of depleted, but we haven't actually determined a limit reference point, and we actually haven't determined if it's an important concept with an objective, or if it's just something we're going to put in there. If we don't have the conversation around it and the objective related to it, then it's almost
Yeah.
like a moot point, you know,
Yeah.
if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. We've defined this. Now, what are we going to do with it? Is
Yeah.
essentially, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think earlier it said it could be, once we have this, it could be used to develop objectives and or management procedures. And now this is a request to have that discussion at the 23rd session. And that just reminds, you know, the Secretariat to put that into the agenda.
And to reserve a big chunk of time for it.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think it'll be, that'll be an easier discussion than fishery objectives for sure. But nevertheless, a fun one. But remember how I deal with objectives. I come, I tell you what you want, and you tell me where I'm wrong.
That is how every biologist seems to work.
All right, so I've added in, Linda, does that clarify it for you and other MSAB members as well? An alternative objective related to an absolute spawning biomass to be at or above. I think that separates the two.
Yeah, that helps.
Okay, good.
This may be a little pedantic, but as someone who's very fond of the Oxford comma, a comma after the parentheses around if determined would also further help separate that those are two separate thoughts.
I love it. I'm a huge fan of the Oxford comma. Okay, anything else on 46? If not, we'll go to the easy one, 47. Okay, we've had a lot of discussion about that. I do want to note that Peggy emailed me before she had to go to her doctor's appointment, and she was basically, I'll paraphrase for her, wondering if the MSAB should make a request for the SRB to elaborate on their recommendation to develop fishery performance indicators. Is anyone interested in drafting a paragraph here asking the SRB to elaborate on their recommendation to develop fishery performance indicators? Go ahead, Linda.
I mean, it seems like we talked about that it would be helpful if the SRB elaborated. And if it makes it happen to capture it as a request that the SRB elaborate on their request to us or clarify their request. Yeah, I mean, to me that.
Do we need this part of it since that's sort of said in the paragraph 47? And not to open up the discussion again. I think we had a lot of discussion about this and we got to where we got with 47. So I'd suggest actually deleting this part. So it reads, the MSAB recalled the SRB recommendation and requested that the SRB elaborate.
Do you think that's clear to people who read it, what SRB recommendation we're referencing?
Yeah, and I'll quote the SRB recommendation in this.
Oh, got it. Yeah, then I think that's
okay. So let me,
Penny.
If you can just bear with me for a second, I'll do that so that it's very clear since we're adopting this. Maybe we can do, yeah, so I think Oh boy. I think what I'm going to do is I'll do it like this. So how can we rephrase the end of this? It's sort of redundant on my mind.
I just say the SRB clarified the recommendation.
Oh, okay. Or what I was thinking is we could, oh no, I think this is good. And requested that the SRB clarify their recommendation. MSAB recalled the SRB recommended paragraph 2 requested that the SRB clarify their recommendation.
I say clarify the recommendation and the intent. We may get more out of the intent.
Yeah, I see your point, Chris, is that it's really about the intent. Would it be better to say especially the intent, or is and intent fine?
I think and intent's probably good enough.
Okay.
Hey, sorry to do this. Can we go back to paragraph 46?
Yep.
What we're saying, an alternative objective. Alternative to what?
Oh yeah, alternative is not right.
Should it be an associated objective related to an? And I think it should be to an absolute spawning biomass to be above, to be not to be at. We don't want to be at it.
I'm fine with that.
That's where that all started.
Yeah, I know. Yep. How about if we leave it just an objective related to an absolute spawning biomass to be above?
That's fine.
Well, removing the at does well.
Well, I guess that's actually a fair question. Are we talking about, if you say at or above, we could be talking about a target or a threshold.
Yeah. Whereas just saying to be above, I think a lot of people would interpret it, well, that's what you're defining the depleted limit reference point, because you do want to be above.
It's a threshold. It's a threshold then.
Yeah.
I'm going to chime in. I had my hand raised and my mic was
Okay.
off and I rejoined the meeting, but I wanted to go back to 46.2 because you made a comment that it was a biological objective, not a fishery objective, but in putting a placeholder in the May MSAB meeting, part of my interest in discussing this is looking at an absolute spawning biomass that is a fishery objective. You know, so I just was hoping it didn't preclude, rather than focused on a B36, which is a dynamic reference point, that you're focused on a stock size that, accomplishes your fishery goals.
Yeah, I stand corrected for us. Thanks for that. And that depleted limit reference point would be a conservation objective, and an absolute spawning biomass to be at or above would be more related to a fishery objective. And I think we would have that conversation when we talked about these as a conservation or a fishery objective.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. Thank you.
I'm glad we're talking about it. There's a lot in 46, so that's always talking about objectives. All right, we're going to back up to 46. Is the MSAB okay with 46 as written now? Keeping the at or above in there to clearly separate it from a depleted reference point. All right. Any objection to 46? Okay. And then 47 sets up 48. And 48 is the MSAB recalling the SRB recommendation and requesting that the SRB clarify this recommendation and the intent. That's very helpful to me, and I will bring that up with the SRB next week if we are good at keeping 48. All right, seeing no hands, not hearing anybody speak up, we will now move to Agenda 5, Other Business, and one-day virtual information session in what is now paragraph 49. I just formatted everything hopefully a little bit better. Noting some dates that are not good. One-day virtual informational session. Okay, that'll work. I'm going to actually add, just to make clear that this is an informational session for the MSAB, of the MSAB, not a general one. Okay, 49, good with that. How about 50? Noting that it's scheduled in May. And then 51 is the recommendation of holding an in-person MSAB023. Okay. I'm gonna, if there's no objections to 49, 50, and 51, I'm just gonna preview the appendices here. Appendix 1 is list of participants. If your name is spelled incorrectly, the incorrect prefix, anything, please let me know. Incorrect email. We have these people attending, and I tried to keep track of who jumped in and out, but I did not see 4 Canadians and 5 from the US representatives. We had 4 observers. I hope their names are spelled correctly. And then we had some IPHC Secretariat. And again, thanks to Sydney, Ken, and Ola for all their excellent help this week. You know it's going really well when you don't even know they're there. We had a few jump on and observe. Okay, Appendix 2 is the agenda. I've added here 2.3, and the rest is the same. The list of documents with additional document added here. The MSAB membership, this was as public, oh wait, no, this is 12th of May, 2026. So this now includes Courtney Young. And I hope you had a great meeting, Courtney. You certainly participated. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And then I will fill in all the recommendations and requests as is outlined in the document. And that's what I'll do. So as you know, we will now adopt this report unless I hear anything that we don't want to adopt it, and we can consider this adopted on the 14th of May.
Can
Yeah.
flag. I think there was one, I had my hand up before we moved
sorry.
on, and it's really stupid little grammar thing, but up in 29, we requested something is. I think it was 29. Yeah, that the table is expanded. Should that be expanded or something
Yeah.
other than is? Yeah, thanks.
Be expanded. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. No problem. We have not adopted it yet, so that's totally fine. So as I highlight the 14th of May, and about to unhighlight it, any objection to adopting this report as written? Not seeing or hearing any objection, we will consider this report adopted. And what the Secretariat will now do is take the report, format it, fill in the executive summary in that last appendix. We'll have Dave Wilson review the report, and then it will be considered adopted or finalized and emailed out to everybody. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and join you all back in the meeting. So over to you, co-chairs.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Alan. Anne Marie, would you like to kick us off on closing remarks?
I don't know. What do we usually do for closing remarks?
Oh, yeah.
Well, shower me with praise.
Yes, we do. Sure.
Well done, Alan! Yay, everybody!
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I'm always really grateful at this meeting to just hear how professional and kind people are to each other in our discussions. It's always really nice to hear from just stakeholders and everybody's differing viewpoints on these things, and it's a great meeting for that. So Alan, you did, of course, have done a great job, and really appreciate all the work that you put into this, and just your kind of helping us guide and steer this meeting. And Anne Marie, thank you so much for being willing to step in as the co-chair for this meeting, taking amazing notes. That is so helpful. And yeah, that's what I've got. I look forward to seeing everybody a couple of you next week, and then at our next meetings.
That's how it's done. All right. At which point, thank you. Alan, yeah, always really appreciate the amount of work that you put in. It always makes these meetings run so much more smoothly. Wanted to also give a shout out to Backroom IPHC staff who are helping make this meeting run smoothly and having it all go. Pete, thank you for taking the lead on actually keeping us on schedule. I think we make a good team. You keep us on schedule, I keep the notes. Everything's good. And yeah, everybody, thank you for letting me step in for this meeting. And hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we will have an actual Canadian co-chair nominated for us so that we can have someone moving forward. And we're not doing this again in May, next May.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Pete, for accepting another 2-year term, and really thank you, Anne Marie, for stepping up and being the interim co-chair for MSAB022. Really appreciate it. You did a great job, and when you do a good job at things, people might want to keep you there. So, so you've definitely proven you can do it. And again, thanks to the Secretariat staff working behind the scenes here. Really appreciate making my job a lot easier when I don't have to worry about all the technical stuff. And, to be honest, I just really want to thank all the MSAB members again. This really is my favorite group of people I've ever worked with in fisheries. As Pete said, it's just amazing how professional everybody is. We all have differing views, and we should bring up those differing views. And I appreciate that people do that in this meeting in such a professional and respectful way. It's just such a good meeting to me. I just want to recognize Anne and William sat through a lot of this meeting. I had a few little conversations with them on the side. They enjoyed it. They seemed to enjoy it quite a bit, and took a lot of notes, they said, and they look forward to talking to everybody and learning more about this process. So with that, thank you, everybody. And I think that we can call the meeting officially closed, and then I'll get to work on finalizing the report.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everybody. See y'all next time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks, everybody.